Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of the Jams Deep Podcast. Good to just start off with. Oh God, I love it. Jams and Deep Podcast. Top of the morning. Where we spin the jams and spill the tea. Today we're talking about the new album from this fella named Kanye West. You might have heard of him. We're talking about the latest escapade, annual jamboree from Kanye West, Donda. We're also going to be talking about the new album from British hip hop UK's person Little Simz. We're going to be talking about Sometimes I Might Be Introvert.
I love how two of those three descriptors were the same.
This is why I write my scripts before I perform them.
I know, right?
This is the bit, Emily, is that Jake always makes an absolute hash of the intro, and that's just we just accept that now.
I got the album names right.
You did, and
despite
credit to
British person, Little Simz,
British human
UK
being.
artist.
As we have established before, this podcast is
to be
highly
fair, to be
prejudiced
British and a
against
person
British
is
people.
really impressive.
Yeah,
exactly.
English
Saoirse?
hip hop.
I
artist
failed,
from the UK.
so like.
And of course, joining us
You get a
this
pass.
week, we have returning guest star. We have AdequateEmily back to us. She joined us earlier this year for our Black MIDI segment. Now we are here to talk about some fucking albums. Also this week, we're continuing our 1991 retrospective. We're going to be talking about this week Primal Scream's Screamadelica. So go check that out once that's out. And we have a record club this week, which is Morgan's recommended record, which is Tim Buckley's Star Sailor, a whack-ass album for a whack-ass week. Had a good time talking about that one, so go check that out too. Also, just a brief shout that I want to make. I'll be linking this in the description below. The person who does the artwork for my book series, Twitter user @SethKiel, wonderful, talented human being. Tragically, their father passed away this week, and there is a PayPal link to help donate to them because they are currently the sole breadwinner of their family, and I want to do anything I can to bring some attention to their cause. So please take a visit if you can spare anything to them down below. They're a very talented person. They've been great to me before.
We also have a couple other things on the channel recently that are worth shouting out as well.
Shit, yeah, that's right.
We just put out, Jake and August just put out a new episode of the Rubber Gum Anime Podcast where you guys discussed, is it Demon Slayer?
Demon Slayer movie.
The new Demon Slayer movie, which we have a capital O opinions on.
Yeah.
So go check that out if you have.
If that appeals to you, go check that out.
That's my specialty, capital O opinions.
We also, I've been meaning to do this for a very long time, is that once upon a time, back when Morgan and I first met back in 2016, we started a Let's Play channel that has since been lost to time.
Thank Christ.
Now I have downloaded every single episode of that and have started editing it into several highlight reels. And the first episode of that highlight reel went up today of us playing Sonic Adventure 2 on the eve of the 2016 election day. So that's a real relevant bit of trivia.
No,
it is. It's in the video.
It was not the.
I hope you reference like a bunch of really old memes in there. Like you'll just like say "Who dat boy" or something, and you'll.
We absolutely did.
Here come that boy. Oh shit! What up?
Who dat boy's Tyler? Sorry.
I love that you amalgamated those two.
I want to see
That's
Tyler
perfect.
dressed up as the green frog on a unicycle performing "Who dat boy."
Oh shit!
I'm still fucking old.
Shout out to, I don't have any specific comments to highlight, but I want to shout out again the people who've been commenting and watching our videos. We've been really happy to see the view counts ticking up on our videos recently. So it's nice to have new watchers and stuff. So thank you again. We encourage comments and interaction as well. So get in the comments below if you have capital O opinions. And with that, we'll get into our opening segment as we normally do, what we have been listening to individually as of late. Jake, why don't you kick us off?
First of all, I'm going to talk about the worst album released in 2021 that I have heard. Unsurprisingly, is the latest from rock band Imagine Dragons, Mercury Act 1, which
what the fuck?
is you must have missed when I was talking about this. I was waiting in I want to explain that I was in the middle of this, is that I work third shift and I hadn't slept in 36 hours. And I was waiting in the middle of a car dealership, bored out of my mind. And I saw that there was a new Imagine Dragons album. And I thought to myself, we haven't taken the time this year to truly listen to many like genuinely terrible albums for our end of the year list. So you know what? I haven't heard anything about this Imagine Dragons album, but it's safe to say it's probably gonna suck. And lo and behold, it sucks. But it sucks in a way that's like, it's the most boring possible way an album can suck while still just like continually one-upping itself in the ways where you're just like,
that certainly sounds like an Imagine Dragons album.
It's not.
I like the fact your reasoning is like, I've been up for 36 hours. Might as well make myself more miserable.
It made sense to me in the moment where I was just like, I should listen to something that like provokes me and like upsets me. Like the funny thing
I
about
put
this
my
album,
hand on the stove to see if I could still feel.
I mean, look, it's not. I'm not saying you're wrong. The thing that's funny about this is that it's called like Mercury Act 1, like it's a fucking Deer Hunter album or something.
They're going full Dream Theater.
Yeah, like it's like ooh, and it's literally just an Imagine Dragons album. There's nothing different about it.
I hear that title, and it's like, that's a threat. You're threatening us with
just
more
like how many acts?
If we're presuming, let's do some basic quick maths here. If we're presuming a 3-act structure, and hopefully we're not presuming a 5-act
structure, Jesus
then
Christ.
that promises a minimum of, let's see, 3 times 8, 24 albums for 8 planets. Maybe if they do a Pluto inclusion, that'll bring it to 27. So Imagine Dragons have got like a project that makes Sufjan Stevens' 50 States project look.
Wagner has got nothing on these guys. Like...
No, exactly. So I'm really curious to see. I'm excited for Jupiter personally, because I think that they could really bring some heft.
The loneliest planet.
The War Planet. Is Jupiter
That's for all three of you who have heard that Sufjan Stevens and Dressner album.
Yeah, the Planetarium album. That's also relevant. I can't believe I didn't think of that.
That's a good album. Go listen to that instead of Imagine Dragons.
I like the idea of this probably isn't going to happen because they're already a successful band, so they can afford to. But one of my favorite things, and I can't think of an example right now, is when an album ends with Act 1 and then there's never an Act 2. Like it just fails as an album so hard that they just don't make another act.
I feel like that's distinctly possible here because the album itself in question is like, it's like supposed to be like a personal album. It almost feels like it's like it's written from the perspective of like a solo artist or something, and yet all of the songs are just like
it's really their Chris Gaines moment.
Yeah. Oh no, ouch. But yeah, I mean, like, again, it's an album where it's like at least on one time on every song you'll go, oh no, and then it'll just evaporate from your head by the time it's over. It's bad. Listen, I had to last night where I just, for whatever reason, out of the blue, it was probably because I was watching Mike the Snare, as I literally always am, but I took a re-listen. And it's probably just because this is like, I frequently cite this
like whenever I reply to him about Crazy Frog.
It's my goal to be noticed by that man.
We have to review Crazy Hits one day just so that we can get his attention.
I will make it a record club. Think I won't. I know.
Literally, I was responding to Polyphonic. Like Polyphonic had a line was like, what's a song that like is perfect whenever you listen to it? And I just responded with Axel F by Crazy Frog. And prompted by nothing, Mike the Snare liked it.
There we go.
On brand.
Beautiful.
But I frequently cite this person as my favorite artist, and I don't listen to him as much as I should. But that being David Bowie, I took a listen to Aladdin Sane, which is the follow-up to, of course, his biggest album, that being The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, which is one of my favorite albums, favorite David Bowie album as of right now. Yes, it's fucking, I mean, it's excellent. And I've always kind of had like a bit of a, like, I guess a slight disconnect with Aladdin Sane, which is an album I've always liked, but I've always just been like, this album is like Ziggy if it was like less structurally ambitious and like there was just more drugs that went into it. And before I saw that as a negative, and now that I'm older, I see it as a positive because Aladdin Sane fucking rocks my shit. Every single fucking song on that album is an absolute fucking heater. That deserves, I mean, like, it's obviously well regarded because it's, you know, it's that era of Bowie, but like there's songs on there that just never get brought up as much as songs on his previous other records. Just like shit, like Watch That Man. Oh fuck, man!
Which is funny.
Fucking banger.
Which is funny because more people can know the Aladdin Sane look than they do actually the Ziggy Stardust. Like many people think that the lightning bolt is Ziggy, and it's not.
Yeah, it's fucking like
point, yeah.
it's just that that iconography is just so fucking ubiquitous at this point, culturally speaking. And the title track too, Aladdin Sane, and Lady Grinning Soul, the last song, like every single fucking track on there. That's an album that I might like hit with a perfect score one day, just because it's so fucking good.
It was for a while. It wasn't. I thought it was good, but I thought like of that era, it was one of the weaker ones. Like for a while, I preferred Diamond Dogs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time went on, I realized like, no, it is up there. You have to get into its groove a bit more than Ziggy. Like Ziggy immediately hits you, Low immediately hits you, Station to Station immediately hits you. This one is like a completely different vibe in a lot of ways.
Instrumentally, it's just similar fucking bigger. It's huge.
It's the darker Ziggy, which feels like an oxymoron in a way, because the whole thing of Ziggy is that it is a more like a fun take on a dark subject. Like it's a fun music about the end of the world, basically, and it feels weird to go from that to darker sounding music about the same darker topics.
I gave a first listen, and I'm gonna get some shit for this. Is that I listened
I know
to
this one.
Yes's Closer to the Edge. And I just didn't. I don't know, man. Okay, look, I'll give you this much. I was so unsure of myself after I listened to that for the first time. I went back and listened to it a second time because I was just like, no, I'm wrong. I have to be wrong. And in my defense, my opinion improved mainly because I listened to the Steven Wilson remix the second time instead of the first time.
Which you should listen to, which is the best.
By the way, I just like, maybe it's just a weird sensory thing with me, but like the first mix of that album fucking drove me insane. That is undoubtedly what had to do with like a little bit of it on the first time, but like there's a part like on the first song really on that part of it. It's just like, oh, there's like a lot of just discordant noise happening, and with that older mix, I did not have a good experience with that. And then on the Steven Wilson version, it's a little bit spacier and it's not as like cluttered together. And it's weird just because I can't really tell you why I love Relayer so much and why I don't love Closer to the Edge. And I think it's just it's very much just like, hey, here's a band where the lead singer sounds a lot like Geddy Lee, and the music is constantly teetering on being sort of like kind of like Rush in places, but it's also just like I guess I'm just not a fan of the compositions on that album, or for whatever fucking reason, and the lyricism / vocal performances just. It just feels like bargain value Getty, and the lyricism is like, it's not exactly like I think Rush are amazing songwriters all of the time or anything. They get some real cheesy shit when you get in the 90s, but like
I was keeping it together until you said bargain value Getty. I was that
sorry.
That was what sent
really
me
don't
closer
care for
to the edge.
I fucking walk closer, bitch, because I really don't care for his vocal presence on that record. It's just like it takes everything.
The first ever Zoom brawl.
Oh please, this is not the deepest. Trust me, if somebody was gonna die on this podcast, it would have been me when we did our Jesse Ware segment. But
and you bitch about us getting on you about that, and so come on.
Yeah, I do. I feel like Relayer is like a really ambitious, over the top, like just aggressively in your face with how instrumentally proficient it is, and Closer to the Edge tries to like strike a balance for me where it ends up just kind of not being able to fill any particular niche, where it's just like every part of this album I feel like I can get elsewhere, and there are just parts of it that instrumentally sound so fucking dated. God, that third segment, I don't get along with that shit at all. I'm sorry, can't do it. But I listened to that purely because Tyler was just like, yeah, Closer to the Edge is probably going to be Jake core. And I was like, oh, okay. I've been meaning to listen to a bunch of Yes anyway, so I want to. It's not deterred me or anything.
Because you love Relayer.
Yes, I know. It was, again, I fucking like tried to gaslight myself into thinking that the record was good,
It's
actually,
okay.
or that I thought it was
Jake,
good.
you're already forgiven for the fact that you do love Relayer as much as you do, because no one fucking talks about that record and how based it is. And it is also the most fucking insane Yes album that they made.
And that's kind of why I like it, because that album's like pushing for extremes. I'm just like, that's what I'm here for with that one. And I guess that's just not it, but it makes me still want to check out like other unusual Yes albums, like Tales from Topographic Ocean, shit like that.
Okay, you might enjoy that record. The problem is that record is 80 minutes long, so I wouldn't push it on you. If you were to listen to another Yes album, I'd probably recommend either the Yes album or Fragile, just because they're shorter and they have
those
like
are two I wanted to get to
classic songs on it. But I don't know. You might like them more, I guess, because they're a little bit more varied than Close to the Edge, I guess, and less kind of, I don't know. I don't know anything at this point. I just have to accept. I've long accepted that what I think someone might think about an album is never something I can trust. It's just never something I can take any stock in.
You're right about me 95% of the time, to give you some credence.
The 5% is enough for me to never want to assume anyone will like or not like anything ever again. Because I just can't set myself up for a situation where I'm like, oh, I know that this record that means an awful lot to me, I just feel that this person will really connect to it in the same way I do. And they listen to it and it's like,
this reminds me a lot when I was like, I think my mom might like Parasite, and I showed it to her and she didn't like it and stopped it before the end.
Well, I think that's kind of your mom's problem.
Anyway.
Also, Jake, I want to ask, do you think you didn't like the album as much because you listened to something called Closer to the Edge instead of Close to the Edge?
I wasn't gonna pick Jacob on that because again, it is just the bit that Jake
I just want to
sometimes
swallow a revolver.
doesn't get the titles right.
I think
to be
I think
fair,
the
I keep-
CD's a little big for you, Jake.
He's not saying he's sorry.
I feel like I know in my heart that the reason Jake made that mistake is that he was mangling it with the song Closer to the Heart by Rush.
See you and raise you the CD to the vinyl.
Fair enough.
Okay, anyway, last but not least, I will talk about that's right. I want to shout out an album that needs way more attention. I listened to it just because it's one of my favorite albums to just sort of like relax to, just because it's got an atmosphere about it that's basically unparalleled, and that would be the Devin Townsend. Of course, it's me talking about Devin Townsend once again. Devin Townsend's side project, Casualties of Cool, self-titled. It's the only album under this particular name, Casualties of Cool. Notably speaking, this is Devin Townsend's Americana / country album, which you might think, and it's just like, wow, that sounds fucking horrendous. Why would you ever recommend such a thing? Well, first of all, you're short-sighted if you think that, so maybe go fix yourself. But Casualties
First
of
of all, if
Cool.
you think that, go fuck yourself.
What did
I hate-
what did Kanye say in that text this way? Like, go find God?
Go find God. Yeah. Casualties of Cool is actually it's technically a duo where it's Devin Townsend who does some of the vocals and the instrumentals on there, along with a singer. I do not know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's Shay Amy Dorval, who sings on there with him. And as every time he works with a female vocalist on any of his projects, her voice is fucking amazing. But yeah, if not for Rustin Kelly's Dying Star, I'd say that this is probably my favorite like Americana adjacent album ever. Casualties of Cool is described as by Devin to be basically songs written by the ghost of Johnny Cash. And yeah, basically like it's not even just an Americana album. It's really like it's Americana with like a really, really heavy gothic tinge, and you can't really tell that like immediately on the first song, but there are ways that you'll sort of hear like the female vocal harmonies on that song near the very end just kind of slant themselves and go into like some weird whispery places, and then the album progressively kind of gets darker and darker to the point where there's like it feels like there is a Lovecraftian presence haunting this album, and it's so fucking dope. It sort of does tell like a story. It's more of like an emotional journey overall, but it's such a fucking amazing, like as per Devin Townsend usual, it's produced immaculately. It sounds fucking incredible, but like it's just such a fascinating experience overall. The raw sound of it is worth listening to enough. It's 73 minutes. It's a big ass album, but it's something that I never have trouble listening to the entirety of. I think that's like a perfect record, and I love it dearly. If you're like a more Devin agnostic person, it's so different from his other stuff that it's still something that's worth checking out as a whole, because nobody fucking talks about it, and I mean fucking nobody. But those are the things I've been listening to this week. August.
First thing from a little band, Sonic Youth, I listened to their album Goo. It's very good, very noisy. I'm
shocked you weren't already like a huge Sonic Youth fan. That's a very you band.
Yeah, I need to listen to more of their stuff because I rather like
Dream
this.
Nation.
And it's just weird eccentricities. Yeah.
Goo. One of the weird things about Goo that I always think about with them is that it's the album that I forget her name. Is it Maggie Chung who listens to it in Irma Vep?
Yes, I believe it is.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to say Maggie Chung was on that album, and I was about to be like,
no, but she listens to it in Irma Vep, and I was like,
yeah,
it's so interesting to me because of all the things to appear in that movie, I wasn't expecting 90s alt rock to appear in an Olivier Assayas art film.
What did you think of the Chuck D cameo on Goo?
Oh, that was so fucking good. I've been saying "tell it like it is" to myself constantly. I've been going around my college campus, randomly bombarding people and being like, "Tell it like it is," just pointing at random motherfuckers on the street. Tell it like it is.
You'll get one person be like, "Hey, Chuck D."
What a fucking like, I mean, the galaxy brain it must have taken to envisage that collaboration.
It's so fucking good. I love I love that track so much. It's so fucking funny.
Dope shit.
And yeah, and the song Moat is the best thing on there. That's fucking awesome. Continuing on, I listened to some classic prog rock from Moody Blues, Days of Futures Past. This is like, it's kind of in the proto stage of prog rock where it wasn't even really progressive rock. It was more psychedelic pop fused with more rock elements. And this is a very classic feeling, kind of like Sphinx's Riddle-esque concept album. It's really fun. It's really summery and bright. It's such a breezy, brisk listen that I think for fans of prog, it is basically an essential to understanding where the sound came from, how it evolved from more orchestral compositions into more guitar-oriented compositions. And yeah, it's really just essential listening if you haven't heard it. It's a breeze, nice album, nice and short.
I'm gonna get on that this week.
Cool.
It looks fucking awesome. I love the album cover. It's so colorful.
So pretty. And I was listening to it on a cassette, which definitely added to the charm of the record. Moving on, because of his recent passing, I listened to Super Ape by the Upsetters, of course, the band of dub pioneer Lee Scratch Perry. This is a re-listen, I guess. I love Lee Scratch Perry. I think his sound is a really fun, exciting blend of just roots reggae and the sound that Bob Marley would evolve to kind of popularize. But I have to say, I think Perry really kind of perfects it so well on this album. It is so hazy, psychedelic sounding, and when the record decides to get heavier, like on tracks like Zion's Blood, you can really feel the energy flowing from this obviously inebriated man. But for a record that is so chill and laid back, it can be so exciting, interesting, and just a really beautiful look into the culture, life, and artistry of this really talented performer who we unfortunately recently lost, although he was like old, 90 old.
Yeah, he lived a long and fruitful life, and it's cool that you're shouting him out as well, because I, to be honest, wasn't terribly familiar with his work until he passed away recently. But the thing you might be most familiar with that he's connected to is that he produced the Clash's Complete Control single, which is one of their most enduring early songs, and obviously was a huge influence on their adoption of, reggae and dub and funk elements to their sound as well.
Absolutely. No, I mean, Super Ape, I think if you want to get into his solo stuff, is really or not solo stuff, just his stuff in general, is really the place to start. It's like a watermark for the genre of sorts, but yeah, that's good. And now on to the progressive metal segment of what I've been listening to. From progressive, I guess, gent band, Tesseract. I've been listening to their album Altered States. This album features a switch up in lead vocalists from their album One to a more melodically centered frontman. What I thought was so interesting and compelling about their album One was the blend of Dream Theater style clean vocals and guttural, growly, more black metal vocals. And Altered States leans most heavily on the Dream Theater comparisons and Periphery comparisons this band occasionally gets, and I think it works out really well. The riffs here are really heavy and bass driven. It's just a really exciting, enthralling record to listen to. Maybe a touch long at points and a touch irritating, even with the vocals get a little grating after a certain point. And I would say, if you want to try out anything by Tesseract, try their album One, which has an amazing 27-minute conceptual suite slap dab in the middle of it, which is awesome. But this band does a great job at really capturing atmosphere and empty space in a way a lot of other progressive metal bands aren't able to do because of just insane shredding and speed. And I think that's really their biggest selling point and what's so interesting about them, even if the writing is a little from time to time. But that's that. And the next progressive metal album from Animals as Leaders, their second album, Weightless. This is kind of a jazz fusion progressive metal band fronted by legendary 8-string guitarist Tosin Abasi, who is an absolute virtuoso of his craft. He just shreds fast as hell, and that's kind of the appeal of the sound, that they're just going and going and going and not stopping. There are some generally pretty good compositions around the board. I really do like, and this album is entirely instrumental for the record, which is part of the appeal of the band, these instrumental sweeping compositions. And they also blend some kind of programmed IDM drum passages into parts of these songs, which I think add a particular layer of personality, especially on tracks on plenty of tracks on this album and select tracks on their first album. My favorite track by them is definitely the song On Impulse, which has a really fun IDM has like 2 fun IDM breakdowns in the middle of that song. But there's a lot of great IDM influence, and the title track Weightless is just an absolutely stunning composition that just gives you kind of what like a typical post-rock crescendo through the lens of progressive metal, and it's just as awesome as it sounds.
I'm fucking sold.
Yeah, that's what I've been listening to.
So I'm going to be terribly on brand for a hot minute and talk about a new folk punk record that came out this year. It is called Unholy Hymns by the Bridge City Sinners. It's like
That's the folk
it's
punk
also
album,
like-
all right.
Bridge
Right.
City Sinners. Wow.
So the album cover has a pentagram on it. Like it's folk punk, you know.
Unholy
it's
Hymns.
also dark.
Very, very on the nose
Yes.
title there.
The Killers, Satan's Fingers, and the Hospital Bombers.
There are elements of hardcore punk that come to the fore later in this album. But for the most part, it's got a wonderful sort of like almost like ragtime feel. It's got a sort of feeling where it's like, I didn't know they made music like this anymore. And I'm so glad that people are. It's just got that wonderful old timey sort of feel to it. I love it. It feels seedy and sort of
What's the what kind of
jazzy
feel?
and
What kind of feel was the
speakeasy. No.
Damn it.
Don't make her do it again.
That sounded vaguely sexual, Tyler.
Do it again.
Don't make her do it again.
Jack.
Anytime
Do
this
it
podcast is
again.
vaguely sexual.
Oh yeah.
Vaguely.
I mean, the tension, the inevitable sexual tension that results from a group of people communing at the same time online every week for over a year for several hours.
I mean,
on a
one of these
Friday
days, the,
evening.
thing I
the
said
podcast
once.
will just start with only 4 screens because Tyler and Morgan will be in the same one.
Shut the fuck up.
I listen to more records than this, but I'm going to round out my segment by mentioning that I listened to The Fat of the Land by The Prodigy, the album that has the crabs that looks like the meme where they go like that.
That's one of my favorite things I found out last week is that the deluxe album just has more crabs on the album. They're like,
so
how do we show there's bonus features on it? More crabs.
More crap.
Crap.
Legitimately like one of my favorite album covers, just because it's such a like surreal and striking image of this like crab just being like with the effects on it, so it looks like the cameras rush towards it. It's
Some
dope
rap
as
songs
shit.
with a crab.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there are like songs everyone knows from this, like Firestarter, Smack the
The
Bitch
crab
Up,
is
stuff
rushing
like
to
that.
smack your bitch up.
I mean, it's like this guy pinches a girl's ass in the club. What do you do?
All you need to know about how like hardcore and entertaining the Prodigy are is that the biggest single from this record was called "Smack My Bitch Up," and there's
I
a
know.
song, and there's a song on it that's literally just called "Funky Shit."
I mean, it's literally like, imagine like the year is like 1980, like the Sex Pistols or like mid-80s. Sex Pistols were broken up. You've gone to your local shitty punk bar, and there's this band no one has heard of, and they're playing like really like lo-fi punk music. Now imagine that band starts doing techno, and you get the Prodigy.
It is like the pinnacle of the cultural relevance of the big beat movement, which was like that really maximalist electro stuff that you also get with like the Chemical Brothers, Dig Your Own Hole and stuff. And Fate of the Land was like the biggest kind of commercial success of that. And it was an album that was like all over my childhood because my dad was obsessed with it. And I remember distinctly, I don't know if any of you have watched this, but I highly encourage you to do it. The music video for the song Firestarter is so iconic. It's literally just that I can't remember what his name is, which one it is. Liam Howlett, I think, the front man of the band. He's got like this crazy fucking haircut where it's like his hair has been like
Is it
rolled
Howlett or
into
is it
like
Flint?
I'm not sure, but his hair has been rolled into like, I don't know how to describe it, and he's wearing this like black and white American
Like an
flag
American
shirt, and he's
flag
in a
shirt.
dungeon like underneath in a sewage system, and he's literally just like, he looks like he's gonna fucking beat you to death, and he's literally just dancing around like this. the whole
Oh
time.
my
It looks like
god,
what-
this is amazing.
It's like if you made a
Holy
punk.
shit.
It's like if you like had like a hardcore punk and then you made him do like one of the dances from like those Gabber videos.
Yes,
I did
Oh my
not
God.
expect this to
Like,
be a David Lynch directed like new metal music video. Is basically
will
what this
also
looks like.
fucking awesome.
I will say the funny thing about that music video is that apparently they were going to do a really like big budget one, and then they just couldn't do it. So they just went to the sewers and
I
recorded
was
it.
gonna say
and it
they
was
just look
much
like
better
they
than
filmed this in
would've.
like my sewer.
and yeah, it's like,
Like,
in
they
my
just-
Your sewer.
in my opinion, it's one of the
Actually,
most
it's not a
iconic.
sewer, it's a storm drain. Sewers have sewage in them. Storm drains only transport water between rivers. Get it right.
In my opinion, it is one of the most iconic music videos of the 90s, and it's burned into my childhood memory as being something that was equally disconcerting as hell and also just fucking awesome. And
I
I
will
became
say-
obsessed.
The funny thing about Fat of the Land is you mentioned like dads being into, my dad was also into that album, and I just realized it is totally the epitome of music that gets white people turned playlists.
Yeah.
Just like-
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what
I'm
it
the
really
trouble
is-
starter, pumpkin
fair.
instigator.
To be fair,
But
that's
it-
because it is in the it gets everybody turned playlist.
True,
Oh, yeah.
true.
That's
But like
true.
Fair.
Firestarter is one of those
Fair.
things that got turned into a huge jock jam, and I totally get why.
Yeah,
Like it's
Yeah.
like it's the same thing where half the songs on my dad's iPod back in the day were songs that he heard at like a Patriots game or something. It was like,
Ugh.
I need this on my iPod. He had that Little John song that samples Crazy Train was on there, and I'm like, have you ever even listened to Little John?
The
He's
fucking
like, no.
what?
Let's not.
You don't know? Let's go.
I hate that I
Let's
know
not-
that.
Let's not explore this avenue further, please.
Oof.
But yeah,
Uh,
anyway,
Oh.
But,
TLDR,
the thing
fucking
that-
listen to Fat of the Land.
if I have one more slot, I won't go into detail, but I listened to Good Kid, Mad City for the first time. Wow, what a
Oh,
record!
shit.
Listen to it, please.
How have you not? I need to walk this off.
Yeah,
Oh.
fair enough.
Sorry, Emily.
Captain's human sacrifice.
But no, of course
Me and
I've
the
heard, like,
homies.
Yeah,
the
homies.
homies.
That's a podcast meme already.
It's so fucking good. Oh, I love that album so much.
I mean, I'd
That
heard
was so
To Pimp a
good, but I
Butterfly
will
before.
say- Controversial take. I think that
Mhm.
I think that there are moments on that album that I wish were. I love that album. I wish that it didn't take so many diversions from the narrative going on at times in there. Those are usually the weakest moments.
I
It-
usually
like the
it's
song
not
with
quite
Drake.
perfect for me too, but
Yeah, like the
I
song
kind of
with
agree you.
Drake and Compton with Dr. Dre are one of the weaker tracks.
Simply every song that features Drake would be better if it was not Drake and someone else.
That's true. Yeah.
You know what?
Y'all are
I
think Kendrick
agree.
admitted,
I
like-
agree, but Drake kind of goes on Poetic Justice. I'm not
Y'all
gonna
are
lie.
not.
True.
I really
y'all are
love
not
that
about to
song.
make
True,
me
but you can
fucking def-
totally tell. I believe there was an
Y'all-
interview where Kendrick said, like, he was like, people said they needed a single on here, so I made this song. And you
Y'all
can
are
kind
not-
of tell.
Y'all are not about to make me defend fucking Drake. That is not what is happening.
I mean, it would be really funny if you did.
It's
can't.
like it's like he just turns up and he just like is so smooth, but also like so totally like almost stereotypically Drake. It reminds me of that one Weekend song from Trilogy where he turns up and he's like, oh, those broken hearts up on that pole, and it's like the most.
I am
cliche-
Drake. I have stripper in Atlanta. I don't call her sad.
It's like this most
That's Drake's
stereotypically
song.
Drake thing, but he was heat like in
Certified lover boy out now.
I feel like with To Pimp a Butterfly, like the reasons I love that is like, I think the storytelling is as strong, if not like stronger than Good Kid, Bad City, where the storytelling is really strong. Mad City, where the storytelling is really strong. But it's like, I feel like I love the dive into other genres on To Pimp a Butterfly and all that shit, and it feels like a more ambitious version in a lot of ways as well.
I will also say I respect the fact that Kendrick has released 4 albums, which it is 4 albums. Don't forget about Section 80. And every single one of them is
Oh.
a concept album.
You know what? And while we're doing Kendrick hot takes, Section 80 is kind of mid. I don't really care
Stop.
for that record.
Stop it.
It is okay. I love Section 80. It's a great album. It is my least favorite of the four, but it's still
totally.
great.
Like it's
Like,
got some.
but I'm the weirdo who thinks Damn's a masterpiece and his second best album. So
there you
like,
go. You're.
I've gotten to this
loyalty.
argument before. I like the way it vibes together. It reminds me a lot of the Saturation trilogy in that way of just how it's like each other song is something is like either relaxing and self introspective, and then it goes back to like what's really going on, like this harder edge, like the narrative of just like if he had gone down a different path. And I respect that.
I appreciate that about Section 80 and Damn. Actually, it's one of my favorite aspects of both is the clear kind of coherence of the whole thing. It's just that those records, I think the highs on those records, both of them are so astronomical, particularly Section 80 actually, which, you know, I probably prefer.
So good.
Yeah, I probably prefer Damn over Section 80, but I do think that Section 80 probably even has the higher highs of the two record. It's just that it's also an album that has a song like Spiteful Chant on it, which I cannot stand. I'm sorry, I really hate that song. So
I remember Spiteful Chant.
But it's still a good album. I like to trot out that hot take just to let the chaos unfurl.
I am really excited for the new Kendrick album whenever that comes out.
Oh, I think
But
we
also-
all are.
It's supposedly
I'm
coming out
nervous.
this year. Like it's supposedly coming out like I think there was October, and I don't know whether October was the leaked release date for the album or for the first single, but supposedly it's coming very soon.
Something is coming in October, supposedly.
Yeah. Anyway,
I hate to say it, I'm nervous because like with a lot of musicians, like you get those like first early classic albums and it just kind of starts slinking down afterwards.
I think he's kind of in that unfortunate position where when you're a beloved artist who doesn't release music for a while, like people are so feverishly anticipating your next music, they start like imagining scenarios and stuff and getting really into it where, so yeah, we kind of just need to, I think, try not to overthink it too much because we just don't know
Same
what
thing.
Kendrick
A lot of
will
people
do
have been doing
next.
that with Frank Ocean, and it's just like I realized after a while, I was like, if he releases an album that's better than Blonde, I'll be happy. If not, I'm happy that we got Blonde, and I'm happy that he's making music. So that's all I care about.
I mean, one classic album is more than most artists release, so it doesn't matter
Exactly.
if every album is not at that level.
Like, Kendrick has arguably 3 at this point. So
Passage of Time has actually made me more appreciative of Damn, so I'll give it that.
It is often said, and it is generally accepted, that Radiohead haven't made albums as good as Kid A or OK Computer since they happened. Does that mean
in Rainbows, though,
It's debated, but yeah, I get your point, Morgan.
We watch the Radiohead retrospective where we cover every Radiohead album.
We did.
listen, they're my favorite band. I'm passionate.
my point was the albums that follow, in my opinion, are not as good as Kid A. Does that mean that I am unhappy that they were released? No. So, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is that there's no point being nervous at this point. I think Kendrick's earned the amount of respect and admiration and trust that Radiohead had after Amnesiac.
Yeah. Also, it's just like
that's
it's
the thing.
just
I think hype culture ruins it in a way.
it's just patently
definitely.
not fair to hold artists to an impossible standard. It's just not fair to do that. And so yeah, why even all you're doing is setting yourself up for disappointment, really.
If
So
Kendrick releases an okay album, I'll at least be happy to have an okay album. Like I'm not gonna be mad it's not a masterpiece again.
exactly. And anyway, this segues nicely into the first album I want to talk about, mention briefly anyway, for my What We've Been Listening To segment, which is the new Baby Keem album, The Melodic Blue, which I listened to on a total whim last night, just because that Kendrick Top of the Morning thing was going around.
Top of the morning.
And I was curious also because Baby Keem is featured on Donda, which we're going to talk about in a minute as well. So I was like, okay, I've had these two different introductions to these specific artists. And I know that this podcast is notoriously trap phobic, not in reference to trap music, not, you know what I mean? So
Listen, I'm right here, okay?
That was a terrible thing to say.
you know what I meant, trap music.
Yeah, I did. And I didn't even think about the implication.
I didn't think
until-
about it either.
Okay, just
But
covering my bases there.
one day a trans person will go on the game show The Chase, and it will be slightly awkward.
I love the image. It's just like the thing about the chase. It's just the world's first chaser. And
Literally like a trans contestant on The Chase, and Bradley Walsh has to say the chaser closes the gap.
I don't know what to think about Baby Keem.
So I know this podcast is notoriously not huge on trap music, and we've had I think back fondly to our Whole Lot of Red review, which gives me a lot of warm fuzzy feelings every time I think about it.
Tyler, you look visibly pissed during that entire segment.
Slash there is an implicit /s in what I just said, but anyway, so like I think that Baby Keem has a really unique and fun voice that also can be very grating very easily, and I don't anticipate anyone here to be a particular fan of him, but I really do enjoy, like, he reminds me of like a lot of the most kind of esoteric trap artists, people like Young Thug and Little Uzi Vert and all that sort of stuff, who use their voice and who use auto-tune in like the most zany ways possible to make themselves sound like
something kind of mean about Baby Keem.
Go for it.
He sounds like, it sounds like Kendrick doing one of his goofy voices, but like that's his regular voice.
Yeah, he sounds like he sounds like an 8-year-old essentially. He has this really like squeaky, childish voice. But
it sounds like he's like 3 feet away from the mic and he's yelling at it.
Yeah, but like I found it endearing for the most part. It's not I know that this is going to make some eyes roll. I quite enjoyed this record. It also kind of sucks ass. Like it's not very good, but at the same time,
I didn't know we were getting to that section of the video yet. Oh, sorry.
It's not very good. It's not very good, but I also found it quite entertaining in parts. If it had been chopped down by like 20 minutes, I think I would be able to say completely that I actually think that it's a pretty decent record, but it's too long and the best parts of it are too disparate. That said, I do want to shout out the song Range Brothers, which was one of the 2 songs featuring Kendrick, the other of course being Family Ties, which was released earlier and had that verse where he talks about how he's coming back in 2021 to take the throne or whatever. But Range Brothers, I think, is the better song of the 2, or at least the song I enjoy more of the 2. It is the top of the morning song, but that's not even like the funniest and most. That's not even the funniest part of the song, to be honest.
I can't get
I like the let's get this shit part is funnier.
The funniest part of the song to me is like right near the beginning of it, where Keem comes in and he's like, his voice is lathered in auto-tune, like lathered in it. So he sounds like a processed AI, and he sings I need a girlfriend. He sounds like a dying Furby, and it's like
it's like not tuneful.
He's using auto-tune to make himself sound worse. Which I actually respect, to be honest. Anyway,
That's funny as hell.
I listened to, and this is the album I'm most excited to share with you all, because I think there's a definite potential for people in this group to really dig this. I particularly like August. I think will really enjoy this record. But I listened to an avant prog / experimental rock record by a band called Cheer Accident, and the album's called Introducing Lemon. And it is a really weird and progressive and strange record. Definite hints of like King Crimson and
album cover.
I'm sorry, you said avant prog experimental album?
Yeah, like if you like
take my money.
Yeah, if you like Black Midi, if you like Primus, if you like King Crimson, if you like, those 3 bands in particular were what came to mind listening to this, then you'll like this record.
It's throwing money at my webcam.
It is bookended with 2 23-minute songs that are both fucking awesome.
The Autumn Wind is a pirate. Let's go.
That's the best song. That's a fucking opus. That song is great. It is a bit too long. Like some of the songs in the middle aren't as good, but when the majority of the record is the fire that bookends it, then I don't really mind too much. But yeah, no, it's just the main thing I recommend this record for is that it's just so unique. Like there's very little else that sounds like this. It's really truly experimental in the sense that it's truly doing things that I haven't heard any other band do, apart from those bands that I mentioned, and yet they all do it in a very different way to the way that Cheer Accident does it. So yeah, Introducing Lemon, highly recommend that record. I had a lot of fun listening to that. And I also want to shout out, I listened to another record from classic electronic / jazz fusion / IDM artist called Eamon Tobin. I listened to their album Permutation, which is their second record, which builds on the new jazz IDM aesthetics of their debut record Bricolage, which I've talked about in the past. Permutation, I think, is an even stronger album. It refines a lot of that. So, and the way I would describe this is like, if you had, it's like an IDM album built around jazz samples, but not like crazy free jazz 60s Coltrane Miles samples, like lounge jazz samples from like the 40s that are adapted into this really kind of quite relaxing and beautiful IDM breakbeat record. Like it's very pretty. It's like the, I guess, more accessible, warmer side of someone like early Square Pusher. And I just really found this record quite exquisite to listen to. The jazz is incorporated beautifully. The production is lovely. There are some really quite classic feeling songs for within this very niche genre here. So if that sounds like something that appeals to you, like a mixture of really moody but pretty jazz and IDM, then you will totally dig Permutation by Eamon Tobin. All right, so that's what I've been listening to this week. Now let's turn to our guest, Emily. What have you been listening to recently that you want to shout out?
Few things I listened to. One that's very fitting that I'll leave towards the end. It's a perfect segue. But the first one I listened to, so I was just scrolling through Bandcamp a few weeks ago, and I found this album that really caught my eye, and I decided to listen to it. And I need to tell everyone about this because it's great. It's an art pop album by someone named Nitsuki, Japanese artist, and the album's name is Orca. It's very homogenic sounding, though I would argue that there are some moments that aren't as obviously not as strong as one of the best albums ever made. But for a debut record, it's awesome. It's soaring. And it's great to just hear like an artist come out and just have this really refined sound. And it just weird to me, like just I think more people need to know about about her.
I listened to some of this and can back this up. Emily recommended it to me. It's also got a cool gay album cover.
It's
I do love it when artists come out, you know. That's always good.
But like it has that like glitchier sort of synthy sound of like something like homogenic, but like the sensuality of something like Vespertine. Like it has that energy, like it feels like she's singing to you. I don't know, because a lot of the album's in Japanese, so she could be talking about anything, but it's really intriguing. And yeah, I just discovered this because it was one of the albums that Bandcamp highlights, like the album of the week or whatever thing, and I just saw the cover and I was like, that looks like a Björk cover. I need to listen to this. The other one I listened to was because Crash Thompson released the episodes on how to get into Bad Religion. I re-listened to Suffer. Suffer is a great album. Everyone should listen to Suffer. Suffer is great. Do not deny that Suffer is great. It is great. Just
holy shit.
Yeah, they're one of those bands that I really enjoy, but I would also argue that like they're not a band where I could argue they have many like albums that you're going to like find like transcendent experiences. They're more just like really fun, bouncy albums that like hit you. Like it's that kind of punk music. And I vibe with it so hard. I guess the final thing that I listened to this week was I listened to a bunch of Kanye albums for preparation of this podcast. I didn't get through all of them. I pretty much like was like I listened to I I listened through like College Dropout to Watch the Throne, and then I was like, time for Yeezus, and then I just laid down in bed, and I'm like, I've been doing a lot today. I just want to go to sleep, and then I woke up the next day.
You have done the ideal experience.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like around Yeezus is when it starts to. I will probably get into this more when we talk about the new album, but for me, the best description for Kanye as an artist is that after I really like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, so I don't want to say graduation, but around, I guess after My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, it feels like the idea of consistency in delivering a full, like, realized experience becomes less of a thing, and it becomes more focused on experimentation, which I respect, but it leads to lesser experiences as a whole. And even I would argue it's some bit prevalent on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, because I love that album, but I still don't get placing Monster and So Appalled next to each other. Literally, why would you put the two posse cuts right next to each other?
The thing that gets me when I go back to Kanye records, and even like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is a good example, is that he often has grand concepts for his albums, and that's a great example, and it mirrors our Donda discussion as well, because that is an album that has a grand concept, ostensibly anyway, but he won't fully commit to the concept.
Yeah.
Like he'll write into it really strong, and he'll like start in this really kind of like clear place, and he'll even elaborate on it in a bit in some really interesting ways, like he does on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. But there's a certain point where it feels like it kind of loses steam, and he stops really kind of like digging into that in interesting ways.
Around the 3-minute Chris Rock skit that feels like it's 8 times as long.
Yeah, I mean, my hot take there is I just don't like Blame Game at all as a song, which is
I think it's one of the weaker tracks on it is basically just an Aphex Twin sample repeated,
which is kind of fucking dope, but I just don't think that much else
also
of what
it's
happens
sad
on the song
that apparently he refused to pay Richard James for it and just said, fuck you, it's a piano concept, you don't own it. Which is weird because it's very obviously Avril 14th.
Yeah,
it is very. But yeah, I hate to be the old Kanye was better person. I don't always think that. It's more
you're on the one podcast where that's not going to be a hot take.
But it's like a situation where I feel like you go back to, as much as people sometimes shit on Graduation for being the pop album, like, no, there's like different vibes, but they also don't feel like they brash against each other or like they clash in a way. Then you listen to something like Yeezus and it's like, what does I'm in it have to do with New Slaves? What does that...
You know what, I feel like, weirdly enough, even though it's one of the less consistent records and it actually has a couple of songs on it that I straight up hate, I feel like Yeezus is one of the most conceptually unified albums.
It is the most conceptually unified, but it does have a lot. Also, I will just say this for the record. I know a lot of people try to argue like Kanye lyrics don't matter. It's all about the vibe. First of all, no, that's not true. If you ever listen to any of his albums, one, and also two, he's super present in the mix. Like he is really, other people where it's just about the vibe, it mixes with the music. Like you don't, MC Ride isn't
He's not
crystal
Frank
clear
Ocean,
on,
for fuck's sake.
If you're a fan saying that his lyrics don't matter, it's about the vibe, you're insulting him.
Like, and he wants his lyrics to matter.
This is the exact same thing as when people were like, dialogue in movies doesn't matter. I like fucking go to the gulag.
And like, the obvious thing to say that everyone's going, that I think most people could agree with me on, is that Kanye lyrics take like a steep downhill after Graduation. Like, it's just like, I like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and Dark Fantasy has the most beautiful instrumental of all time in Kanye's discography. It has one of the best, probably the best chorus of his career. Do I have to hear too many Urkels on your team? That's why your wins low?
It's a great fucking bar, Emily. What the
no, it's not. It's awful. It's a bad pun.
Talking about Donda.
Well, no, because that mirrors beautifully. Like, there's a lot of bars like that on Donda, and I unequivocally.
Okay, let's get into Donda.
Now that we're here, Kanye West.
No,
Yeah,
no
fitting.
introduction
Feel
needed.
that.
You don't need to know who he is. You know who he is. You're here because you want to hear us fucking talk about this shit. And
Yeah.
okay, here's the thing: is that I think that I speak for everyone when I say that this whole thing of like Kanye's image and like trying to tie it, like it's just like at some point you can do it to inform the music a little bit, but if we start getting like conceptual and start trying to break down the net, it's fucking pointless. Everyone
Absolutely.
knows everything about this dude because that's what he's doing. He's making himself the art piece. You know Kanye's background. You know everything that's led him to this point. You know the whole thing about
There was
the
a point
controversy
where you
with Marilyn
could.
Manson and the fucking baby
Yeah.
fucker. And wait, not that. Hold on. Donda is an album that has been basically memified because it's been in production for however long. We've heard about Donda ever since he started talking about Yandi, which is another project that never actually happened. So everybody kind of thought that this album wasn't even going to be real for a while. And even when we had parts of it and they did the little live stream things, people didn't know if it was going to be real.
Oh, I
it's
thought it was
here,
going
and
to come
I
out
don't
for
know
like
if it's-
3 more months.
I don't know if it's still real. A month from now, we could get a Life of Pablo patch, and this could be a completely different record for all we know.
I
But
think
in the
the best way to put it is that I can't tell if this has been in production for 5 years or 3 weeks.
7 minutes.
Yeah, it has that Yay vibe where it could have.
Yeah.
When he said this, I made all this music a month ago. You're like, yeah.
Yeah.
No
you did-
shit.
I know.
Even as a Yay defender.
And
yeah.
even
Well,
then, I think it's undeniable that like there is at least a point where all of that stuff doesn't really, well, I mean, like, not that it doesn't matter, but it's just like we're going to talk about the music, because I think if there's one thing that's prevalent about Kanye that's way too just like absorbed in popular culture right now, it's the fact that the dude's like, I don't remember the last time I heard someone talk about the music on The Life of Pablo. I don't remember the last time. It's all about image. It's all about artifice. And Donda is a very difficult beast to tackle because, of course, it is behemothly. I mean, just good fucking God. If you take those 3 part 2 bonus tracks off of this album, it is still 1 hour and 26 minutes long.
This is Swan's length.
I mean, it's a behemoth. Like, no matter what, you can't attack this thing from an angle
Soundtrack
that
to the
feels
Donda.
holistic
what it
or
is?
fair.
You know what it is? Is it's Drake length.
Oh God. Well, we don't need to get into that whole debacle, but like,
Well, it's a
I
very,
think-
very integral part of this album.
say
is
you
the
a
relationship
lesbian.
between
Me
Kanye and
too.
Drake.
Wow.
I think that this is notable because, in at least for me, by my own assessment, in terms of a unified sound, this is probably the most sonically cohesive Kanye's been since probably My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, frankly. I think that there's definitely a focus on distorted, minimal beats that sound very, very like they're focused on having a lot of weight, a whole lot of presence. They're not as ornate, they're not as intricate as Kanye's beats usually are. Even on something like Yay, which was comparatively sparse, they are still beats that are comprised of a lot of moving, working parts. And here, I think there's a bit of a departure from that because there's an emphasis on features here that's also been in his work beforehand, but there's a fucking lot of them still, like a way more than I think anybody expected, at least. And there is a sense that this is a project that even for Kanye, every album of his is an event, but this is an important one. Donda, of course, being in reference to the name of his mother, he's introducing all of those gospel elements that he was trying to incorporate on things like Jesus is King. So there's an element of grandiosity here that he's trying to get across. And that's kind of where we're all sitting. And I don't know if anybody wants to particularly go first on what they think of this, but I'm just saying that no matter what, I'm going to need a lot of fucking alcohol.
A few things I'll offer up, I guess, as fodder that I want to kind of introduce here is I want to acknowledge something, which is that, yes, I completely agree. We need to talk about the music. There's a lot of peripheral shit that we don't need to dig into. That said, there are certain things that feed directly into the music and the lyrics on this album that we should sort of talk about. And and those are things that will come up, I guess, as we dig into these songs, and particularly relating to this overarching concept of the record regarding Kanye's state of mind at this particular point in time, his relationship to his memory of his mother, and the current sort of messy state that his life is in the wake of his impending divorce. Like, this is a divorce album through and through. Like, you can hear on a number of these songs are clearly written after Kim left him, and a lot of them are him reckoning with that state of being single. There are parts of this record where he is kind of just really in his feelings about it, like he's really dour and down and broken. There are parts where he almost seems like sure that he will get her back in some way, or that the family unit will be restored through God because of the holy communion of the children that they have together. Like, there's a lot.
So this album is cope, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah, totally.
But
I mean, Kanye is always doing that.
The album lays its table out as being about Kanye dealing with like his mother in a similar way like 808s is in a way, but the introduction of the Kim stuff, it almost makes it like a concept album about the loss of a female presence in a masculine life.
Well, that's
It's
the thing. Like, Donda
concept.
and Kim are analogous in Kanye's life. Like, they represent the same sort of thing. And this is a record that broadly is about Kanye coming to terms with the loss of both. Like, so this is something that I'm kind of borrowing a little bit from resident YouTube critic, Professor Sky, who is an avowed Kanye scholar and made a feature-length video on this record that I highly recommend. He made a really interesting point, which is that in his view, like, the Kanye West discography of like records that represent who Kanye is and what Kanye is about began with 808s and Heartbreak. And the three albums that precede it are pop records that happen to have been made by Kanye, but aren't really about him in any way.
I would disagree, because Last Call on College Dropout and everything.
There are moments like Through the Wire and Last Call, obviously, where Kanye is drawing from personal experience. Family business, yeah, like, definitely. But broadly speaking, in terms of this artistic direction of Kanye that we can appreciate now with some distance, and with his career having been like coming up on 2 decades long, he really didn't shift into the mode that we know him in being in really until 808s and Heartbreak. And the thing is, he's stuck in that mode of real introspection feeding through his lyrics, but it is the introspection of an avowed narcissist and who has this incredible God complex and an absolutely ravaging bipolar disorder. So every album since 808s and Heartbreak have been about that in some way or another. And their messiness has reflected the messiness of that, which is not to say that the messiness then excuses the flaws of the album. It just explains them, I think. And so every record that we've gotten since then has been about Kanye's present state of mind while making that record, and it has reflected where he's at in his life, and it's reflected what he's going through, and that has been, I guess, the concept more or less. And it's gotten muddied and lost in the sheer disarray of the more recent records, but I think comes back into the fore in a slightly more meaningful way with Donda. Like, yes, I think Kanye muddies and muddles some of the explorations of his relationship to his mother on this record. I think he kind of doesn't execute it well at certain points. For instance, the title track, where he has a sample of his mother, but it's of his mother talking about how great he is. And it's like this really, it's like, it's not really, he never really unpacks how his mother has affected him beyond the fact that his mother made him great. And that's all. Like, she never really kind of investigates the relationship between him and his mother and how his grief has affected him. That sort of complex and darker, those sort of complex, darker emotions are much more tied into the Kim side of things. And so, yeah, you have this, I think this is the most conceptually unified record that Kanye's made in a long time, in a sense that all of the songs more or less relate back to Kanye's relationship with women and his relationship with God, and how these two kind of aspects of his life interrelate. But then the issue becomes the fact that Kanye kind of shoots himself in the foot by losing his way in the wilderness of that with this 110-minute album.
I think it is interesting, because I do think those first 3 records are personal in a lot of ways. Like, ending with Big Brother on Graduation is emotionally vulnerable moment to admit that like the person that you were best friends with for years got you into the industry isn't as close with you anymore. There is a confidence in them of like, I've gone through all this shit and I can be emotionally honest with you, but I feel like I'm on the right track.
Mm. Yeah, and then when his mother died, and that's the thing, like I should have made that clearer. The distinction is that between Graduation and 808s and Heartbreak is when his mother died. And that is an incredibly tumultuous event in his life.
Not only did his mother die, his girlfriend broke up with him around the same time, which he had that girlfriend for like 6 years, was planning to marry her. And it became this sort of situation where I don't want to psychoanalyze Kanye. I don't want to, but it does feel like there has become a thing where he's using, I feel like you can feel in some of his albums that like he's using the music as almost a therapy session in a way.
Absolutely.
And as a result, as much as I enjoy a lot of the music from it, there's less of a focus on it because it's like this release to him, like this, like, I am pushing myself into all of this. And as a result, like there's less of a focus on the experience because it's more his own experience in making it.
Yeah, and it's also just an experience that's like really difficult to like engage with as well, because what Kanye's done is he's never processed the grief of those two losses, and the success that he had achieved at the point where those losses happened provided him with a means to engage in all sorts of excess and move into this world of excess.
I'm not
and that's
sure,
been reflected in the music.
I'm not sure if he's ever properly gotten like the treatment that he maybe needed.
He's been very open. Sorry, he's been very like open about his sort of like rejection of what doctors have sort of advised him to do to get healthy for the sake of the art.
His repeated thing of "I'm no longer taking meds" is maybe not the best.
Right,
but he has spoken a lot about how he believes that we live in a simulation and that he has no free will as well.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a solipsist.
On that note, I want to drill in on this albums as therapy sessions thing, because I think that's A, super interesting by itself, and B, relates to how I have related to every album since 808s personally. But where it's like, it feels to me, because he's being so like honest and unguarded about the way in which he's being dishonest and guarded, it feels to me like every album is like a character study about Kanye West made by someone else. It feels like Paul Schrader is making a movie about Kanye West every time.
That's kind of one of the appeals as well, like his ability to kind of like not like just genuinely just be ugly. Even in his grandiosity.
If I can make a point on that though, that isn't actually what's happening. God damn it, Kanye stands, stop saying these albums are concept records. They are not. Like the Kanye in the albums is not an invented character. This isn't all one performance
They're
art.
concepts the way every album ever made is a concept album.
Yeah, like
it has ideas.
Well, he's described himself as a conceptual performance artist as well. Like
the way people describe Yeezus, though, is like there's a character in this album that goes through an arc, and I'm like, that's just Kanye.
Yeah,
that is literally Kanye. That is not a character he invented. This isn't a 4 or 5 album long arc where he invented some character.
The arc is just the arc of Kanye's life that you're getting to see insights into with these records.
Like, I saw someone once compare it to Requiem for a Dream, and I'm like, no, this is a real man's life. They aren't cuts. Yeah. These are just people. This is just him talking about himself. He didn't invent a character.
Yeah, I mean, that's the weird thing about Kanye's whole like online persona and the way people relate to it is people like the way that I find the way people relate to a man just mentally unraveling online, especially recently, has been weird.
It's very parasocial.
It's very parasocial, and it taps into
exactly. But it's not just parasocial; it's almost religious.
People see him as like a bit instead of a human being, if that makes sense, and that's weird to me.
The thing is, though, he kind of encourages it, like in the way that he literally paints himself as a god, as this godlike figure, as someone who is in communion with God, as someone who is essentially like, never mind the sacrilegiousness of all of this, he doesn't give a shit about it, but as someone who is essentially a kind of Jesus, obviously a Jesus. And that, like, let's to get to this album, because I know some people
Also-
are probably thinking we've gone away a far afield here, but that is something that Kanye is espousing all over this record: his communion with God, his like spiritual cleansing.
The best example of like how he contradicts that on the album, like you said, like he says sacrilegious shit and then he says that he serves God. The best part is he censors all these curses on the album, which demonstrably already makes like these songs slightly weaker because there's all these weird pauses that I fucking hate that he does.
Sounds
this
like
now.
the album
But-
is fucking hiccuping itself. It's fucking.
I mean, it sounds like
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to put that. Shut the fuck up, Kanye. You're gonna do all this religious shit and be like, oh, I can't say the F word. Fuck, dude, fucking look at the Bible. God turned a bitch to salt because she looked at like a town when she wasn't supposed to. And you're gonna say, oh, God's gonna look at me poorly because I fucking said shit once on my
Okay.
album that I
Can I-
already
can I
said
finish my
in my
point? 'Cause I
10
was
records
about to-
before this because I'm a fucking idiot.
Emily,
Can
Make
I
yourself
make the point?
family.
Can I make the point I was going to make because it perfectly summarizes that breakdown there? He censors all these curses, and he's one of the people he's censoring.
he's fucking Kanye
I want to
West.
hear a
He
new
could-
sound effect every time they censor a
He-
curse. I want to
he's
hear like a car horn.
He's fucking Kanye West. He could have asked the fucking featured artist to not swear. He could have just done that.
Yes,
He's Kanye West.
exactly.
Mhm.
But the most egregious
Yeah.
example of this, and this is aside from all of the other problems with this track, which are numerous, the really most egregious example of the censoring is on Tell the Vision, because
Oh God.
this song
Ah.
is a tribute to Pop Smoke, essentially. It is a remix, and when I say
It's what?
it's a tribute to Pop Smoke. It's a
Pop
remix.
Smoke on.
Yeah, Pop Smoke is on the song. The late, dearly departed Pop Smoke.
Pop Smoke's
is-
the only person on the song.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, let me finish. This is a tribute to Pop Smoke. It is in his words, remix. And when I say remix, what I mean is the original song being played through an iPhone speaker with a microphone held up to it. That's what it is. You can hear the fucking trap hi-hats from the original song buried in this mix that he's tried to
Oh, wow.
get rid of everything else in it.
I love Carrie and Lowell.
But anyway, shut up for a second. What I was saying is the reason that this is egregious is that this is a tribute to Pop Smoke by remixing a song that Kanye was involved in of Pop Smoke's before Pop Smoke's death, that it was then released on a posthumous Pop Smoke album. So first of all, this exact song in a different form already exists on a different album by Pop Smoke. So it's entirely redundant before you even evaluate the sound of it on this record. I have no idea why it's here other than Kanye saying, oh, well, I'm fucking mad they put it on there. I wish it was on my album instead. But then you take a vocal sample from someone who is passed on to do a tribute to them, and you censor their sample. Like, it's one thing to say, I'm censoring a featured artist, because he got in touch with the artists on this record and say, hey, I'm censoring this. That's a reason why there was one song that was supposed to have Andre 3000 on it, who then pulled the song from the album because he didn't want Kanye to have only a censored version of it. And so Kanye said, fine, I won't put it on the album. So he's okay with getting consent to censor the verses of people on this album. And yet he will still censor someone who can't give consent because they are dead in a song that is a tribute to their legacy by including one of their verses, butchering it by recording it through a fucking iPhone speaker, and then cutting out half of the fucking words in it because they're swear words. What is this is all to say a perfect
It also is
example
mixed
of
like
how-
shit.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it sounds like
It sounds
it
awful.
sounds literally like the vocals were recorded through a fucking tin can on a string. That all this is to say, all of this is an example of the point
Drums,
that I
too.
bring this. The reason I bring this up is that it's a perfect example of Kanye having an idea and then completely butchering the execution of it, like tributing Pop Smoke and then doing it in this really kind of redundant and stupid way, and then completely misfiring on the way that he includes it in the album. I like this album overall. I'm broadly more positive than negative on it. And I think especially in the first sort of half of it, it's got some really strong songs. But there's a certain point you reach on this record where you just reach a certain point and you're like, man, you just didn't think about for a second about cutting anything, did you? You just, everything you made, you put on here, unless you didn't get permission to put it on here. You literally just didn't stop. And that's the most, that's the thing that really gets me, is that Kanye makes his own albums have these horrific barriers to entry. And it really makes it difficult to engage with them in any way, because it feels like they're willfully daring you not to do that. And I like the non-committalness of having 2 versions of 4 different songs on this record just put on here onto the album itself rather than being released separately. I mean, pick a fucking version, you coward. Literally just pick one. Like,
I want to be clear, we're counting those. I've seen a lot of people say the bonus tracks don't count. First of all, they're labeled as part of the album. Second of all, if it's not a deluxe edition, they count.
You have to count them, because this is the way that Kanye's presented the album. And so that does affect the way that I evaluate it. Even if I can see that it's as an arc of a record, it is meant to end with No Child Left Behind, which incidentally is a stupid choice of closure, because it's just like this weird...
Okay, can I make... This is everything with The Life of Pablo taken to its extreme. It is an album with terrible sequencing, to the point where every time I listen to this or The Life of Pablo, but especially this, I feel like I'm listening to an album on shuffle. Like, I feel like someone shuffled it.
God.
Which is like kind of infuriating, because it starts off really strong. Like, I think Jail is a really
Jail
good
is
way
a great opener.
Though
I would argue Donda, the title track, is better than Donda Chant as an opener.
The opener.
I would agree with that probably, but the thing is,
and
like,
Jesus, like Moses and Jesus.
I feel like if the bonus tracks on the part 2 tracks on this record were like integrated into the sequencing before then, as a more holistic part of the record, it would be better, because it'll be like using like leitmotifs. So it'll be using motifs to like bring back ideas and bits.
So they're literally just the same song.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're doing that, they need to be shorter, like part 2.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that.
Like,
I feel like
if you're going to do that, you don't play the best example, Jesus Lord Part 2. Do we need the entirety of the Locks and Jay Electronica and Kanye's already double length verse on there? Like, it is an 11-minute track, and I'm just gonna listen to the other one, because that version of the song is good, even if Jay Electronica had to get anti-Semitic for no reason.
Like, if you're gonna sequence your album like this, like, don't end it with a track that feels redundant, because the way you've listed it, that's 11 minutes 30.
Look,
don't do that.
It's very clear, I think, that Kanye intends for those last 4 tracks to be bonus tracks. Like, I think that's obvious. He just hasn't labeled them.
Then make it a separate EP.
I know, but this is the Kanye. He doesn't think about these things. He just put it on the fucking record. That's the thing. So, but yeah.
Just a note on the semi-opening track Joe already talked about. I fucking loved this song.
Me too.
It's a real highlight on the record. It's worth focusing on. It feels like the small period after they reformed where Fall Out Boy were good before they got bad again.
It reminds me a lot of a way Ghost Town too. It reminds me a lot of that, like, things are maybe going to shit around me, but at this point, like that feeling of like bittersweetness of like everything is kind of weird right now, but also God's gonna get me. It
feels
to be okay,
like you're starting,
but it's tough right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels like you're starting this really long epic arc in media res, where like it's the point where like the hero is at a low moment and they have to pull back to the third act, and it feels like you're starting there.
Which is why if you brought back a little bit of it at the end, where if you didn't have Marilyn Manson on it, instead had someone who wasn't, someone who should actually go to jail, and have that, and then played like Who's Gonna Survive in America type, like the speech from his mom there. That's an excellent closer. That's an excellent way to bring it all back around. But instead he does the entire track over with DaBaby and Marilyn Manson, which, God, that song sure had value 2 years ago.
thing is, like, I think
Right.
Kanye has envisioned quite clearly his concept for this record and how it it's espoused in all of these songs. And it's just like he's stopped there. He's not considered how to piece these songs together, because I actually think you could make a significantly better record with the songs.
I already did.
Yeah, exactly. I bet it's been an exercise for me as well.
There is a fantastic 40-minute album like on Yeezus. Remember where that was an album where at the last minute Rick Rubin was like, hey, Kanye, hey, yeah, maybe you should cut half of these songs from this album because it would be a fucking mess if you didn't. And then this is the album, except if Rick Rubin didn't say, hey, Kanye, cut half of these fucking songs.
The thing is, like, I got a playlist on my Winamp called I'm a Fixed Donda, where I'm continuously working on this. But anyway, the thing is, like, the difference between Donda
I have
and
a slim version on my Spotify that I'm sharing with people. And guess what? It's 50 minutes long. And guess what? It's a much better album.
Yeah.
Even if I wish I could fix some of it, because oh god, I wish she hadn't censored everything. And
like,
oh god.
I'm just reading through my notes, the amount of times that it alternates between multiple songs going, this is really great, to like snore, to great, to snore, to great, to snore.
The first 10 tracks are snore central after like Jail, besides Jail and Hurricane, and then don't
Hey,
what
come
is
on,
it? The
come on.
song that samples Lauryn Hill, which is great. Believe What I Say.
You can't be,
between
don't tell me you're dissing on Off the Grid. Don't tell me you're dissing on
Off the Grid.
No,
sucks.
what?
It's so long.
Shocker. I
What
actually
the fuck?
really
Stupid.
Off the Grid is the best beat that Kanye has made in a decade.
It goes on for
Do you
too
wanna-
long, and then it
do you
doesn't
want
go
to-
anywhere.
Do you want to know something that will lay you all out flat? Is that I really like Playboy Carti on Off the Grid.
So do I. He's great on that
He's
track.
better here than he is on his own fucking album because the mixing
Well,
is
it's just-
fucking awful.
It's just because, you know, I like fucking hated A Whole Lot of Red, but I think Playboy Carti
We all
and
did.
The reason I really like him here is that he sounds like a teenager playing with the sort of big boys. You know, his voice sounds like a child. And it provides this really unique atmosphere that feels like relatable, you know?
I don't hate Off the Grid because of like Play by Cardi or like the beat or anything. What I hate is it's a track that should have been like 2-3 minutes and it's expanded to 6. And by the end, I'm just like, please just finish the song. Please
Grid. This for my kid.
That's
just
how I
so
feel about
so much of the shit on this album. It's just like
so many of these songs should be cut down.
He had a fine like 2-3 minute pop rap song that he turns into this bullshit by adding
God
like
Breathed
500
is the same
choruses.
thing.
It's like,
And the
That's
way
how I feel
the way-
about
Junya.
fucking way.
the way Off the Grid ends with a pitch shifted Kanye West saying a black man would never shit his ribs is
It's fucking funny.
hilarious.
That's a fucking great end to the song. I
it's
love
really
that.
hilarious.
But it also like should have happened 2 minutes earlier. There's like so many songs where it's just like he does this really long outro, and you're just like, please stop. This is, as I said, like The Life of Pablo, half these songs can totally be cut. Half of them can totally be cut. There are a million freestyle 4s on here that you just, do you need television? Do you need remote control? Do you need either version of okay? I know people like the second version better, but they're still both kind of unnecessary for the theme.
Yeah, the thing about
Why is Hurricane and Moon separate? They're part 1 and part 2
Yeah,
of the
that's
same
true,
song.
actually.
One needs to lead into the other. And why does Heaven and Hell come after Moon? That is a Yeezus style track after the most chill thing that Kanye's ever made. And I like Heaven and Hell. I agree with Backwash on it. Backwash said it sounds great. It does. It needs to be earlier in the album, as in like an interlude.
The thing about a lot of the most inessential tracks on this record, and okay is a good example actually, is that Kanye is actually reasonably good at crafting a hook on this record. Like he has some pretty good hooks.
Right.
Remote Control, I like the hook on that song as well. Like individual little moments where he'll have this nice little vocal melody that he gets into, and he just doesn't know what to do with it beyond that. He'll loop it. He'll get into this really repetitive cadence, like he does that thing where he like repeats a syllable at the end of a line over and over and over, just fills space because he can't think of how to write properly.
The lyrics are less bad on his recent albums because he barely raps on them. He just does choruses repeating over and over again. He has other people take over, and then he has a singing verse by someone, and then he has a bridge. It's like 18 bridges in a song. And I'm like, I respect it, but also like, honestly, the points on this album where he actually sits down and crafts a verse are usually some of the best moments. Jesus Lord's verse from him is like
Oh my god, Jesus Lord
heartbreaking.
is great. What you were saying, Emily, I think taps into two things I want to touch on. The first of which is I actually love the fact that this album is so overloaded with features. It's one of my favorite aspects of the record. The reason for this is that I'm also basing a lot of this off what Andre 3000 said about his process of making the record, even though his track isn't on here, which is that Kanye wanted to make a tribute record in a way, even though it's about a lot of other stuff as well, obviously, right? But what it feels like is basically he's gotten everyone he likes or respects or is friends with onto this record to basically have this sort of group session of expulsion of feeling, or like a party. It's like a album feature length group track, you know, and on a record that says like emotionally naked is this. I think that's an incredibly valuable thing, and I'm glad it exists, and I wish more people would take that approach.
I also appreciate the communal aspect of the record in the sense that I appreciate there are so many features on this record, and that broadly the quality of the features is usually pretty good. It's a couple of misses, but nothing outright bad.
Perfect example. I'm going to say this. My favorite song in the album, and a song that I will argue is like a top 10 Kanye song ever. I love this song. Moon is made by its features. And the thing is that for a while, it was just Kid Cudi on there. And then he added Tom Tolliver because he really liked Tom Tolliver. And that's what elevates it into this huge, spacey, operatic thing.
His hook
and
is so fucking... I'm almost get teary listening to that because he's so like...
is so good. And it sounds like the Kid Cudi track that I always wanted in a way. Like it sounds like the perfect Kid Cudi track, and it sounds like something put all together. And it's a very communal song, but one, again, as I mentioned, it's placed in a weird spot on the album. That's a song that probably should be coming like in tandem with Hurricane, and it should be coming like more towards the end of the album. Instead, it's track 12 on a 27 track album.
Yeah.
And there's also just this feeling of like, once you get to that point, like it's just sort of like, when is this album going to end? I feel, as I mentioned, I'm a Swans fan. I don't mind long records. What I mind, and this is the same argument I have with movies, if your pacing is bad, it's going to feel longer. You can have a 4-hour movie that feels longer than a 90-minute movie. And if it's full of, if the 90-minute movie is full of fluff or poorly paced or just isn't done in the right way, it will feel longer. I feel like this album feels its length completely and even more. There are so many times I wanted to take a break on this album and just not listen to it all in one go. And it feels like that while there is a coherent theme here, it doesn't build to anything. It feels like it could build, but you have tracks like 24 or like Come to Life, or any of those tracks that should be like this finale, and they aren't. Instead, it ends with Jesus Lord Part 2, and which Jesus Lord is also a song that should be towards the ending, but it shouldn't have the entirety of the locks on it.
The last thing I really want to say that won't be feeding off of anything else is I want to shout out my two favorite songs on this record, which Emily, you actually just alluded to, but I haven't really talked about. One, I think, is the more popular of the two, so I'll start with that. That being Come to Life, which is an utterly gorgeous finale, or should be a finale. I mean, I consider it the denouement of this record. Fuck whatever comes after it. And I don't want to talk about structure anymore because we've really beaten that dead horse anyway. But I really love Come to Life. I think that the piano arpeggiations that Kanye includes are beautiful. I think the way that he builds the song up compositionally is really smart and satisfying. I think his vocals and even his singing sound actually quite moving on this track. I think that it works as this beautiful, it's like in a better album, this would be the perfect and way to end it, because it would be like this earned catharsis and this earned bow around all of this emotional darkness that yet the album doesn't earn, and yet it could earn if a lot of its fat was trimmed. But it's a really moving song. I like that it's basically just Kanye. It feels like a real kind of soul-bearing moment, and I love it. Slightly less relevant to concept, but my absolute favorite song here, which I don't know if I've heard anyone really ever talk about, is 24, which is a tribute to Kobe Bryant, as in the number 24, Kobe's number. It's a beautifully soulful song. I think it's the best sort of encapsulation of Kanye's sort of gospel-esque sound. The use of the Sunday service choir on this track is beautiful, although I like the way that they're kind of like distorted and made to sound really harsh and strange in this song. But there's a genuine kind of emotional catharsis here, especially when you get to that part where Kanye saying, "I know you're alive and God's not finished," over and over again. That genuinely, like, I well up when he says
and
that.
it feels like it feels like not only is he talking about Kanye, it feels like he's talking to his mother, obviously.
Yeah, like it's definitely 100% a song about Kobe, but obviously it has that applicability to the Donda thing.
It's one of those things where it's like it's a dedication to someone who has been lost, but it's a dedication to all that we've lost as well.
This album, we've already talked about a lot of its flaws. It's messy and meandering, and there's a lot of tracks that need to be here. But I still, even in the moments where I really don't want to be listening to the record, I'm responding to Kanye's emotional nakedness more than almost any record he's made ever.
And I think that's the thing that keeps people hooked to Kanye, the people who do really care for him, is there's always a glimmer of that.
Yeah, when viewed as an album, it's not as strong as it can be emotionally in its parts, as what I would say. Like, it feels like it hits you, but like you, as like a full art piece, it doesn't feel the same as it does when you're just relating it to the person, if that makes sense.
I think it's an album that was inevitably doomed to be disappointing, in that it was never going to live up to the expectations that people had set upon it. And by embracing that kind of disappointment and awareness that what we were getting was certainly not going to be what we expected, or it was never this, I mean, just Donda was never going to be Kanye's best album, just by virtue, I think, of the hype circle surrounding it, by virtue of the context of his recent career. But that aside, it has moments I like. I generally agree with a lot of the criticism about structure. I'm a big structure nut myself, so you can imagine this record drove me up the wall a couple times with the placement of certain tracks.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that it's kind of embracing a lot of the kind of pop rap stylings and stripping that back, and kind of, yeah, stripping it back for this minimal aesthetic. So to me, it didn't sound like this worlds apart from anything else he's done sonically, with admittedly a couple more cohesive ideas, improved beats, but almost uniformly across the project, I found the ideas to just not be filtered or edited in almost any meaningful way, because just leaving Kanye in the studio has proven a futile effort in the past, i.e. Jesus is King, and it proves a futile effort here with him just feeling so indecisive and unassured of this record as a whole. It's really, and that's what bugs me so much about it, that there are great, properly great Kanye songs on here. I really like Hurricane with the Weeknd, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Abel Tesfaye.
his features great. I begrudgingly do enjoy the Playboy Cardi feature on Off the Grid, even if the censorship does take a bit of the helium out of Cardi in particular on that song, but I still had fun with it. I think a lot of the featured artists are pretty solid here because that's a talent I think Kanye has, his ability to select and capitalize on trends he sees in the music industry and repurpose them for his own benefit and package on an album. And I think really putting the feature artists kind of up front and center is really it's a smart enough choice because it tricks the listener into thinking this isn't just about him exclusively, it's also about other related concepts. Yeah, I think a lot of the immediacy, the just right there-ness of a lot of the writing, like these songs are not terribly complex. I think that's the fun, the joy of Kanye's music to the general public and just music listeners in general, and that the ideas, the narratives behind this are so easy to take a hold of and understand. I really I think that's one of Donda's benefits. And yeah, the whole time I'm just like, you could have edited this really and had a fine album. It's just that runtime makes it unbearable to sit through as a whole. Like I broke this album up into 3 like 30-minute chunks while listening to it just to claw my way through it. But yeah.
Right, this is longer than Reservoir Dogs.
I think like the
legitimately.
biggest sort of damning thing I could probably say is that even though the edited version of this that is 40 to 50 minutes long is undoubtedly better, it still wouldn't be in the top half of Kanye's discography for me.
No, I would
argue it might be.
It would be solid. It would be solid from an artist who is usually best when they're really like going for it. And yet this is a very minimal album that has very little drums, very repetitive song structures within themselves. So
that killed me so much.
So even if you like cut the really weak songs, you still have really good songs that themselves are hobbled, as you've said before, Emily, by in many cases just being too long. So
and good songs that feel like, I don't know, they honestly could have been produced at any point in Kanye's career and I could have been fooled because he's still relying. He's relying on the same pop rap like melodic chorus to fuel the tear ducts structure that he's used since College Dropout. I've heard you've done this with so many goddamn songs.
The thing is, like, it feels like Kanye, even right up until like Yeezus inclusive, it feels like Kanye's consistently been building his sound, like doing something different with his sound, developing it. But ever since Life of Pablo, he's kind of just been content with these very minimal arrangements that get more and more minimal with each album and don't really show any new sound or any new side to what he can do as a producer either. So you feel like Kanye is in this stale state of repetition where he might be doing new concepts or whatever from album to album, but he's not really developing his identity or his repertoire as a producer. He's not really doing anything new. And that's, I think, also where Donda is a bit of a letdown and why I continue to be really befuddled by the Kanye fans who say it's up there with his best, because I don't understand what that is based on. I don't get the basis for that. It feels so much like a low stakes, low intensity thing. And you seem to love the intensity of Kanye, and yet he has stripped back so much of that here. And so I don't get that.
If there's one final thing I have to say about it, it's that I do find myself very annoyed with a lot of the gospel stuff on here, rather than like thinking it's some cool aesthetic thing, because especially when you get to a longer song like Jesus Lord, I just feel like you're just preaching to me with this gospel like epic gospel choir in the background, and I'm like, Christ, I get it. Really, I do. I understand the significance religion has in your life and how it's impacted your music. I really get it. I don't need a whole album produced like this. It grates me so hard. It's a particular thing that just gets under my skin because I find it so obnoxious.
Yeah, he often has the Sunday service choir and he just doesn't know how to use them. Like on New Again, for instance, where he just has them say, "Make me new again," over and over and over at the end of the song as it just loops for no reason. Like that is an absolute career low light for Kanye. There's just nothing happening.
I wish that I had anything to say about this that isn't, it's a very long Kanye album that has its moments. That is my thoughts on it in a sentence. But they do run a bit deeper than that, with the complete and utter disregard for sequencing. Like, at least Drake would pretend sometimes to give a shit about how an album is sequenced. And I'm not even saying that Kanye doesn't give a shit about album sequencing. What I'm saying here is that finish your fucking album. I'm so tired of this.
That people
Can I
don't
just
like
say-
get on Kanye's ass enough for that either. They're just like,
No.
oh, well, it's a formless masterpiece where you have to put the pieces together and they're out of order.
Fuck you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and Kanye accepts that and says, right, fine, I don't really need to, like, the mess of it is the point or whatever. And you can't keep using that as an excuse.
The funny thing is, that's why of his recent albums, I'm a defender of EA, because it's the one album that feels like it has a beginning and an ending and an arc. Kids See Ghosts kind of ends abruptly. Jesus a King has basically one note that it plays for its entire runtime. In the Life of Pablo and Donda are just unorganized messes. And I'm just sort of like, at least one time when he only had 7 songs to work with, he wasn't able to fuck that up.
Yeah.
I'm convinced at this point that he's not going to get better about this kind of shit, just because he's filled himself with such an echo chamber of complete horseshit and fucking agree people, yes men, and
just like sycophants is the only word you can use for it.
Yeah.
I think the Kanye of, even Yeezus, I think the Kanye of the Yeezus era is gone and isn't coming back unless some shit majorly changes, which I guess is always possible, but like fucking, I don't know. I don't care about most of the shit that is on this album. I don't care about what Kanye is doing unless he's like being provocative in some way. And this is extraordinarily unprovocative. And
Kanye trying to be wholesome.
It's gross and weird.
It reminds me-
That's the thing about that, is that Kanye is trying to be wholesome, and then he invites Marilyn Manson and fucking DaBaby to be on his album. No,
exactly.
Yeah, I think his
It's
I remember
it's
when
like your
he-
youth pastor showing up with eyeliner.
I think the
It's-
point, not to
Your
defend
pastor
that, because
exposing
I
the eyeliner is
himself to his
raped
children.
people.
I have to wonder, at what point does this become an exercise in futility, listening to this album? Because it's just like, yes, it's a document of Kanye West's mental state, and it's just like, cool. Yeah, I wonder how valuable the document of Kanye West's mental state is going to be in a year from now, because it's probably going to be completely different, because he's manic and he's weird and he's in a completely different place than he is right now. And then this is going to feel outdated and weird, and it's going to feel like a relic of its time. And who fucking gives a shit when an album is so imprinted onto its moment in the past, when you are in a genre and you are in an avenue of music that is focused so deeply on the cutting edge edge when hip hop is the dominant genre in music, and you're just fucking here being like, oh, I'm gonna make all this fucking album that's gonna sound like a gospel choir shit, and it's gonna do all these things, and it ends up sounding like the same fucking shit you made on Jesus is King, but slightly better mixed. And it's like, oh wow, I should really applaud this man for doing all of this. And it's just like, you were all applauding the bare minimum. This album sucks. It's fine. I think it's fine. It's bad. Shut up.
I think if there's one positive to take away from this and the whole Donda thing with the whole rollout that we avoided talking about because we have enough on our plate with the music, is that Kanye seems less and less interested in making albums anyway. Like it felt like he only even put this out as an album out of obligation. He was much more interested and has been much more interested and has, I think, put much more effort and work into the shows that he's put on, into the visual performance side of everything that led up to this. And I think what I see Kanye doing, especially as he gets more confident as a performance artist, is leaning more into that in the future and leaning away from albums. I think this weird structure thing that he has on his last 3 albums, including this one, is a reflection of the fact that he doesn't really want to be making albums anymore anyway. He's just like, and he's doing it only really out of a sense of obligation. So I think if there's one positive thing to take away from it, it's that there may not be very many more Kanye albums because Kanye may lose interest entirely in even releasing music in that way. He seems to be much more interested in making his art in whatever form feels like the most interesting way for him to go at it. And I think that he's lost interest in making albums. And I think this is proof positive of that.
I would agree. And my one thing on the stage shows is, I know we said we want to focus on the music and what the content is there. I will still maintain that my line about how I thought that in 3 weeks' time he'd be performing at LA Stadium with the ghost of Ronald Reagan and I forget what the other one, the ghost of Ronald Reagan and Bill Cosby.
Bill Cosby innocent.
Am I wrong though? And it'd be 5 hours long. Like that just describes what every week with Donda was. It was just like, oh, people really like this album. Oh, people are saying they changed it and made it worse. Oh, he brought on Marilyn Manson.
Yeah. And that's the Kanye arc of his art in a nutshell. Favorite tracks and ratings for Donda. Jake, why don't you lead us off?
Well, my least favorite track, I'm gonna lead off and say that's the Tell the Vision, because that song fucking sucks my nuts.
We made it.
Fucking good job recording that shit on an iPhone, Kanye. You really fucking did it. Favorite tracks are Jail. That song has a pretty good hook on it. Then there's Hurricane, because I like the way The Weeknd's voice sounds. And Moon, because I like the song Moon. And this album is a 2 out of 10. I give it a 6.
August, your turn.
Okay, my favorite songs on here are
Scrolling through
Jail,
pages of songs.
Hurricane, and I guess Believe What I Say. Least favorite is Tell the Vision. Yeah, I'll give it like a 5 or something. I could easily see it going down in a year.
I was going to say that's higher than I expected from you, but also it feels like the most appropriate way to rate this record.
No, I mean, fucking, I don't care enough, man.
Yeah. Morgan.
Jesus Lord is probably my favorite song in there, but there's fucking anti-Semitic shit in it. So fucking
Good job.
Least favorite.
Go listen to Phoebe Bridgers.
There's so many fucking candidates for that.
We made it.
Did we?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. 4 out of 10.
Saoirse.
Right. So my favorite tracks are, I hope I opened this on my page. I did. Jail. I'm going to say Jonah, and I'm going to say Come to Life. My least favorite track. I don't know, Jesus Lord Part 2, because fuck having a bonus track last song that's 11 minutes 30.
It features an
giving this a
entire rap
9.
group.
I will say about
Yeah.
about Jesus Lord Part 2 that it has a real nice verse from Jadakiss talking about the passing of DMX, which is quite moving, and it is just a shame that it's very difficult to discover because it is buried within this 11-minute.
And then there's 2 more verses.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'd love to listen to a song about that, you know.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
it's
and
a
I
5
don't
out
have
of 5
anything against
record.
the Logs,
5.5
it just-
out of 5.
It's just, yeah, why do we need
Yeah.
5 rappers on this song all delivering twice the verse count that they usually would have on
And
a
like
on an
also
album?
like with the Jail, 2 versions of Jail, DaBaby replaces Jay-Z. It's not Jay-Z and then DaBaby, right? I don't know. I haven't know if I've even listened to it properly. But with Jesus Lord Part 2, Jay Electronica is still there as well. Like, why not just take Jay
Yeah.
Electronica
and
out?
Kanye too. Kanye's verse
Anyway.
is still on there too.
Anyway, doesn't matter. My 3 favorite tracks are 24, Come to Life.
Are you ready, kids?
24, Come to Life, and Off the Grid, which I still maintain as the best beat Kanye's made in a long time. And my least favorite track on this record is We Made It, We Made It. We made it, we made it.
We made it.
I don't even have the stomach to try and do a good impersonation of may he rest in peace, Pop Smoke.
Listen, I don't want to make fun of him, but also like I'm not making fun of him, I'm making fun of the mix.
Yeah. I am kind of making fun of him because we made it. And I give the album a 5.5. And now,
Okay.
Emily, your turn to do your favorite tracks, least favorite track, and rating.
Can I just say, like, I was talking to Jake about this. I was like, I was worried that because I came on the first time I came on was with an album that was my most hype album of the year, and it ended up being one of my favorite albums of all time, that I came off as like a soft listener, and that I came off as too nice. It seems like I'm kind of gonna be painted in that light again, but not as much as I was before, because I have to rate this the same as I did The Life of Pablo, because the highs are really high. Moon and Believe What I Say are genuinely great songs. That Lauryn Hill sample is great. Like, it really accentuates the track, and it feels like something that he could have done in any era that just feels really emotionally resonant. But oh God, it is an album that I think if you pared it down could have been one of his best albums in so long. It would have been like a top, maybe not top, no, I'd say top 5 album. But like The Life of Pablo, it just is bungled. I'm gonna give it a 6, but it could go down to a 5. Originally it was a 5, then it went up to a 6. It could go back down to a 5. I don't know. It's all over the place.
I'd say that
Kanye's
like
The Astonishing.
a reputation of being too nice to albums, like if you spend long enough on this podcast, that will evaporate. I promise.
Yeah, that's true. We
but-
can be fucking bastards when we want to be, which I think we've done a pretty good job of.
It's true. I agree.
Oh,
So
I
that's it.
Sorry,
Oh,
were
I
you saying
forgot to say
something,
least favorite track.
We made it.
Yeah. I hate to be unoriginal, but yeah.
Ah, fuck.
Wow.
Help.
So that's an average of 5.3 out of 10. We've only given that to 3 other records.
Please tell us what they are.
Rabbit. I will. Sing the
We're gonna
Grace
need a
first Fucking Rabbit
paramedic.
record. Jake will be fine. 1X by 3 Days Grace and Welcome Jazz by the Viagra Boys.
Okay.
I want to hear Kanye do a cover of Animal I've Become.
Oh
All I think about with that song now is a video I found just called Bernie Sanders AMV, and it was just a slideshow of pictures of old men set to Animal I've Become, and like half of them just do not look like Bernie Sanders at all.
Oh my god, I want to see like a mashup of zoo videos of animals going wild and like you sync their mouths to the lyrics of that song. That'd be cool. Anyway,
Okay. Well, now that gauntlet's done, I think it's time to talk about an album that we all generally like, and an album I think that's going to be quite cool to hype up, because it's a very rare sort of thing to get an album like this that has this kind of like in your face grandiosity, and that is the new Little Simz album, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert, which is, so Little Simz is a UK hip hop artist who has been in the underground for a while, steadily building a circle of underground hip hop hype over the past decade. She put out a fantastic album in 2019, I think, called Grey Area, which if you haven't heard, I highly recommend. It's much shorter than this record. It's a solid half hour. And I mean, not to spoil how I'm going to go today, but it's still, I think, her best work. An incredibly fantastic and concise and powerful and punchy record that has a lot of technical prowess on it. But that said, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert is a record that I think took a lot of people by surprise, in the sense that you can tell from Grey Area that Little Simz is kind of building up and gaining in confidence, but this sort of leap in sheer in your face power and confidence that this album represents is kind of unprecedented. And it's seldom that I think you get the kind of leaps to hugeness that this album kind of represents. In certain respects, it reminds me of like Kendrick with Good Kid, Mad City after Section 80. Like, it has that sort of huge, like, it's a deeply personal album. Like, it's very introspective. Yeah. It's through and through about her identity, her place, her hyping herself up, her kind of finally seizing this well-earned, hard-earned success that she's been grinding for. And the general sound of this is so ambitious and huge and larger than life and dynamic as well. It's not just the case of an artist trying to sound as loud as possible to make people get that impression. There's a lot of beautiful instrumentation and dynamics within these really beautiful and rhythmic and funky and grandiose and powerful arrangements that it's an absolute sight to behold.
Yeah, I feel like the last time I remember it, like a UK hip hop album getting this much like critical excitement, it's either like MIA record or like Boy in the Corner by Dizzy Rascal or Panic Prevention by Jamie T, and that's about
I would say Skepta's Konnichiwa is a good sort of a recent one, because that won the Mercury Prize as well, which fingers fucking crossed this does next year. Because I can't see, it feels like such a clear definitive statement, not just for Simz as an artist, but also for a kind of entire sort of genre. And there we go, got the sign. Like it represents.
I will say it has tough competition in Cavalcade.
Yeah, well, Cavalcade I think won't be eligible next year. Maybe it will be. I'm not sure what the cutoff is. But anyway, like this not only this kind of massive leap forward for Simz, but it represents this kind of massive advancement of a whole sound and a whole scene, and putting it on a stage that's wider than it has been through the lens of someone whose perspective, whose identity, whose experience is less present in the scene as we know it. Like, I mean, the UK hip hop scene is defined by a lot of predominantly male artists speaking on very restricted sort of experiences. And this is a very kind of like polar distinct thing to that is much more, it just adds this different side of the experience and of the world, and a celebration of things that are not necessarily as celebrated within this niche of music. I think that's perfectly encapsulated with one of my favorite songs on the record, and one of my favorite songs that Simz has made, Woman, which is this great, like, funky celebration of all of these women in Simz's life and in wider culture that Simz might not necessarily know, but who have influenced her, that she is kind of doing this massive celebration of them, and a kind of as well as this kind of celebration of her own ascension into the ranks without being like too, egotistical or anything like that. Simz does a great job of being both like hyping herself up in a way that feels genuinely earned, but also kind of having the sense of humility about her place as well. It's just a great personality and balance that she strikes on this album.
It's interesting. The way I first heard of Little Simz was when Gorillaz were doing all those concerts for humans, and they brought her on stage as like to replace like all the rappers on the record. So she was rapping De La Soul's parts and stuff like that for the band. And I was like, well, who's this? As a woman, I like seeing women be successful in music. I'm holding pliers for no reason. I realized that was weird.
I like it.
Going to castrate the patriarchy.
But yeah, like I was like, I want to check it out. And then Gray Area started getting hype, and I listened to it, and I liked it, but I didn't like it as much as other people. I'll be honest with that. It felt like it didn't have many ebbs and flows to it, and it didn't feel like it represented the jazz as like I felt like the jazz instrumentals were a bit samey to me, and like I feel like that style. But the key thing was the weakness was not Little Simz, and I remember thinking like if you could get like the perfect production for her, she can make something amazing. And I listen to this and I go, why didn't we give her an orchestra sooner? Why did we not give her all this sooner? This is what it's like that first time like you heard Kendrick in front of like that, like a huge jazz orchestra type situation where you're like, oh, this is what this person was made to be behind. Like,
I think what makes it effective though is like, this is like, you get the real sense that Simz has been building toward this, and she's doing this now at this juncture because she's ready to do it. And you get a sense of real growth in the things she talks about. She talks about a lot of the hardships that she's had to overcome. One of my favorite songs on this record is I Love You, I Hate You, which is this great song where she meditates on her really complicated relationship with her father, and that folds really neatly into the Little Q 2-part track where she talks about her strained relationship with her cousin, who's actually on part 1 of this 2-part track, who again is tied into her father's side of the family as well. So she celebrates the people in her life and the ways in which she has grown and been able to come to terms with these difficult parts of her life. She celebrates the growth that she's reached by talking frankly and honestly about these relationships that she has. And you get a sense of that growth through the huge grandiose sound of the music. Like if this was a record about her being like really down and like in a dark and bad place, then that grandiosity wouldn't work. But it works because you get a sense of Simz having survived some journey and reached some kind of peak, both in her artistic development and in her personal development. And the whole grandiose sound of it is beautiful because it's like a one big party and celebration of that.
One of the things that I think is interesting about, if you brought up Little Q, if I can bring up one of my few tiny grapes with this album, I do think Little Q should be one track. The fact that it fades out in the middle and then comes right back, it's a little weird.
I kind of wish that I don't mind that they're split up because I get it. But
Little the fact that one fades out into but it should be all together and lead into the other. The fact that it fades and then comes right back with the same melody, it's like,
I do like the dichotomy though. Like part 1 is Q or Qdis himself actually speaking to Simz, and then part 2 is actually Simz taking his perspective and actually speaking back to her. So like on part 1 you have him talking to. So in part 1 you have him talking to her, and on part 2 you have him talking to her through her, and it's this great little like examination of their back and forth in terms of their relationship, and it gives you a lot more context on the stuff that you were just introduced to in I Love You, I Hate You. Just great sequencing.
I agree, and like the only thing is just that fade is a little annoying.
Fair enough.
And what I will say about this album that's really interesting is, well, to compare it to something, I have to weirdly mention one, I have to mention 2 Kanye albums, which feels weird because I want to get rid of all the Kanye talk because we just did all that. but like there is an element here where I heard like the instrumentation on the first track, Introvert, and I was like, it reminded me a bit of like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy when that starts up, where you're like, oh,
I had a
this
John
is
Brion
something
stuff
great.
on Late Registration.
That was going to
personally.
be the other thing I mentioned, is like that sign of like, oh, orchestras and like rap music are not things that have to be separate. Like they work really well together when they're really well orchestrated, like with John Brion. Is it John Brion or John Brion? I forget.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like his work with Kanye on Late Registration, and yeah, this album feels this feels like a really great exploration of the self. And the other album I would also kind of compare it to is Janelle Monáe's Dirty Computer. It reminds me a lot of like that, and the fact that it's like this personal exploration, and it's bigger and bolder than anything the artist had done before, even though Janelle Monáe was always doing big stuff. But
You know
Dirty
what?
Computer was like,
That's a really cool comp, because she has big Janelle vibes. Like if you look at a record like Arcandroid, like that has a similar sort of like grandiose, string laden, huge sound
Right.
to it. I totally.
the
see
reason
where
I
you're
bring
coming
up
from.
Dirty Computer is that Dirty Computer felt like the most personal album
Yeah, I agree.
from Janelle. And it felt like this, like, it felt like a personal exploration where you went on this whole arc. It is also no coincidence that Dirty Computer is one of my favorite albums of the last decade. But it is, it reminds you a lot of that, because it just feels like this unrepentant exploration of the self, yet with the grandiosity and storytelling of a master of the art in a way. Like it feels so defined, and yet also it feels so itself. In a way, it, like we mentioned with the Kanye album, again, I don't want to, this is the last time I'll bring him up, is like with him, like it feels like he releases these things as therapy sessions and then doesn't get them down. This feels like an expression of the self in a way where someone went, I can turn this into something and make it bigger than it make it relatable to so many people. And I have to say, like, this feels wholly her own, but also there's so many tracks on here where I know I relate to them, and I know several people out there who will listen to this and look up to her and be happy. Like, how many like British Black girls are going to listen to this album and be like, I can do this, I can conquer everything, I can tackle everything? That's awesome. And
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, like, she reminds me of artists like No Name and like Rhapsody, who are just like, you listen to them and you're like you listen to them and you're like, these people like have overcome so much, and they're so personal and so expressive in their lyrics, and like they're so mastering of the form, and there's a pride in their, like, in the fact that they're perceived as a woman in the scene, where it's like, it doesn't define me, but it represents part of who I am. And I like that, because as like a trans woman and stuff like that, like that's how I feel. It isn't all of me, but it's part of me, and I'm going to talk about it. And that's how stuff like Woman comes in. And
Yeah.
God, it just feels like,
I mean, I remember when I was growing up at school and seeing how like big a part of like women compared to men, how like a bigger part of like the hip hop that was being listened to, like MIA was, and like how much that was a part
MIA
of,
changed people's lives.
Well, exactly, right. And I feel like it's early days, so I'm not going to make that call, but the potential's there for this record, you know.
What I love about one thing I love about it, and this is sort of what you were talking about, Emily, but it also introduces something that August, who can't be with us for this review, has passed on some thoughts, and I want to kind of bring them in here because I think they're relevant. Is that, yeah, she's talking about, like, she's celebrating her womanhood and her identity, and it's awesome to see her representing this positive addition to this scene. But there's this great sense of duality on the record, right? So it's a record about her celebrating herself and lifting herself up. And there are these moments where she has that real kind of braggadocio, like,
But there's a doubt.
Yeah, exactly. But also like it's about her, but it's also about the people in her life and how she relates to them. And so there's this dichotomy and duality between her introversion, her internal experience, and the external world itself, and how it plays off and against her in both ways that can be political in terms of the womanhood aspect, and in ways that can be personal in terms of other things related to her life.
She feels like a dominant force on this album, and also like someone bearing their soul and being vulnerable at the same time. It feels like the duality of most people, and in a lot of ways it feels like some of the best like rap albums I've heard, in the fact that like it is in itself both like an exploration of like, it can be fun, it's an exploration of life, it can be fun, but it's also looking at the self in a way. And that's what the interludes and everything allude to this being a personal journey of self-acceptance. And I really think it really turns out that way, especially with the last two tracks being so final. How Did You Get Here is just such a steamroller of a closer. It just hits so hard.
Or like a penultimate track in effect. It's a closer in effect, but like it's kind of like the last two tracks are kind of like one extended song, I think.
Yeah, How Did You Get Here, then Misunderstood is like, Misunderstood sort of like the final thing, but How Did You Get Here is like the big explosion, and then Misunderstood is like the final wrapping up of everything. And I appreciate that. But the fact that you can have like a song like I Love You, I Hate You, that's just so emotionally vulnerable, and then have a track like Rolling Stone that's just a total banger.
Oh,
that
God.
Like
Rolling Stone was the specific song that reminded me of MIA. Like it has her sort of ridiculous, like even a bit like, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but even like a kind of bit tasteless bit of like just intensity and just like going off.
It reminds me a bit of album I already mentioned, which is Damn by Kendrick. The fact that like there's songs like, oh god, I'm blanking on some of the tracks on Damn, but there's like a few, there's the track where he like talk like Fear, that's just like 7 minutes of just basically him breaking down. And then you have a track like DNA that's just like the face of it all, like no, I've accomplished this, I could do this, I could take you all down. And then you go later and it's like, can I though? And it's like a perfect encapsulation here of like how Little Simz is doing, where it's like, I'm proud of myself, I've made it this far. And the imposter syndrome of, did I deserve to make it this far? And it's one of the best representations of that feeling, I think, on here. Someone mentioned it feels cinematic. It feels like we went on a journey. And I will say at times it does feel a tiny bit its length. Not too much. It's hit after hit after hit. There's just some moments where I'm just like, okay,
My biggest reservation with this record is that I just don't, Emma Corrin from The Crown is on a lot of this album doing that kind of guardian angel thing that she does, like words of encouragement. And every time she starts speaking, I'm just like, nope, stop talking. I don't like hearing you on this album. I don't like her voice. This is a me problem, incidentally. I can't really hold it as a critique of the album. She just kind of takes, when Emma comes in, she just kind of takes me out of the experience. And also I think that a lot of her affirmations, like her shit, like, it's real kind of like, there are some parts of these interludes where some of the inspiring advice that she gives across reads a little bit too much, the kind of flowery quotes that mums will frame and put on the wall of their house, or like Tumblr assurances like the saddest people shine the brightest or whatever. Like that's just the vibe. It's like the stuff that she's saying is stuff that Simz is already communicating through her own internal struggle, through her lyricism, such that we don't need to have Emma, Princess Diana from The Crown, on top of these songs bluntly pushing that. It just takes me out of
I really, really liked the interludes on this record, and I took them with a much heavier dollop of irony than what I'm getting from what you're saying, I guess. In that, like, I feel like in at least like the interlude, so the narrative is framed like the protagonist of this record is like walking through a world where all these affirmations are being thrown at her, but there's a deep level of like inhumanity to the nature in which they're delivered. There's a level of detachment that I felt to the narration that I took as a positive, because it felt like something that felt very true, which is like if you have like disadvantages in life, whether that's because of like race or gender or mental health or any shit, right? Like people will be ready to give you these very like hollow affirmations to drive you to sort of to convince you that we live in a meritocracy when we maybe don't, you know? And the whole of the rest of the record feels like saying that, you know, fuck you, I'm gonna go and prove this to myself.
My issue with that is that I still feel like it's redundant, because the joy of this record is Sims's celebration of herself and not sort of like, you know, lowering in any way to incorporate these kinds of ironic voices. And I also just don't think they're ironic. I think they're genuinely meant as affirmations, but I guess we just read those differently, which is fine. And I want to say as well, I don't object to the interludes. I just object to that particular aspect of some of them. And like an Introvert, for instance, which I think is a near perfect song, is as soon as she comes in at the end of that song, and so it begins, the bass is an amalgamation of everything. Rules are not to be played by rebels. I'm just like, fucking, I'm out of it. It ruins the song, to be honest.
I disagree. But what I will say
that's
is,
my feeling.
I will say the thing for me is I wasn't the big fan of the rapper that came to tea until we got to the garden, and it felt like it paid off, because the garden is such a lush, perfect way to segue into the last two tracks that it felt like it paid off. The interlude that I have the most issues with is Never Make Promises.
Yeah.
That one feels like it should have just been Protect My Energy into Point and Kill, which Point and Kill is just a blast too.
Never Make Promises just feels like the only point in this record that I would call entirely inessential. It doesn't really add to anything.
And I would argue I See You is one of the lesser important tracks.
Well, I like I See You because it's another dimension of her personal life, because it's kind of a love song to her partner, but yet it also functions as this extra point of introspection where this relationship is a vehicle for her to start thinking more about herself in certain other ways. Would you take me as I am, overlook all my mistakes, though correct me when I'm wrong, humble me, put me in my place. Like, she's seeking to have this force that she can trust to ground her. And I like that aspect that it adds to the record, of the fact that she wants to be this entirely self-assured person, but she also has to acknowledge the fact that she does rely on certain people in her life for some affirmation to a certain extent. And so I like the song for that reason, I guess.
I will say I like that purpose in the song. What I feel like is it's one of the songs that sonically just isn't as coherent with the rest of the record. Like enough. It feels like it does drag a bit of momentum. But otherwise, like, can we talk about how great some of the lyrics on this are? Like, how much it drove me to tears, the line of, "At night, I wonder if my tears will dry on their own, hoping I will fulfill Amy's purpose." Like,
God, yeah, shit, fuck.
I first heard that as fulfill my purpose, and that was already good. And then I heard Amy, and I was like, wait, no.
I mean, the great thing about the lyrics in this record is it has those heartbreaking moments, but also lyrics that just go fucking hard. And it feels like it moves so freely between those gears lyrically. It's so cool and beautiful.
For every bit like Introvert, you have the song where she talks about being stabbed. It's just like, holy fucking shit. God. I did not expect to be crying in this Wendy's tonight, ma'am. This really fucking hurts. There's an emotional poignancy throughout this entire fucking record, whether it comes to the songs, whether it comes to the interludes, where it's just present on literally fucking everything. And Simz just, there's never a single second on this entire album throughout its entire duration where you think that she does not want to be there, where she does not want to be absolutely, there is a a vibe that she's contributing to, whether it be more of the theatrical, more of the elevated stuff that's on some of the interludes, which sure, I can see that being a sticking point for some people. Personally, it makes me feel
I
like
didn't
the
mind them
record
as
is more.
much.
I like how it makes the record as a whole feel a little bit more cohesive. It makes everything feel a little bit more cinematic for me. And honestly, I wouldn't take them out just because all the interludes have musical ideas and all of them have things that stitch everything together. Like I love stuff like how the Gems interlude into Speed, into Standing Ovation, because Speed is like this song that's just sort of like building onto this idea of her expounding onto her introversion by like anytime when she's on this record and she's like being more in expounding on her interiority, it sounds really orchestral, it sounds really big. It reminds me of John Brion's stuff off of Kanye's early stuff like Late Registration. And then you have the stuff where she's being more performative, where it's a little bit more electronic, where it sounds a little bit more like her last album, like Speed. And then the track will progress into sounding something that's a little bit more like the strings will pick up at the very, very end of that song, and it will segue into Standing Ovation, and then it'll be her being a little bit more interior. It's like, oh God, the way this album flows from track into track is just absolutely fucking seamless.
She manages to navigate the really difficult task of having a consistent sound across a 60-minute record, but without being just repetitive in terms of the musical ideas. She always finds ways to do new things with this ornate string arrangement, with the really fucking sexy rhythm sections on this record. Again, I call back to songs like Woman and Point and Kill as well, which the rhythm section on Point and Kill with the bass and the sticks are just
chorus.
Shout out to
Obonje.
Yeah, shout out to him, like his vocal contributions to Point and Kill and Fear No Man, which incidentally
it might be Obonghe. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I'm not sure too sure either, but either way, shout out. I love the way those two tracks are like kind of one song that are like split into two parts, and his vocal performance adds a lot of color to it. And it's just a great little pickup as well in that final half of the record, those two songs together. And also, like, actually, there's a lot of bangers in the second half of this record, because you also have the song, one of my favorites on this, which is Protect My Energy, which is such a fucking heater. Like, holy shit. I played this in the car the other day, and I literally was like making the fucking windows rattle.
Nah, man, this shit bumps in the whip so hard.
Oh, shit. And what I love about it is, like, it's a different side of Simz as well, because she's not only versatile in the way she talks about herself, but like she's properly singing on this song. Like she moves away from just rapping, and she shows she has like a really powerful singing voice too.
Beautiful voice.
Like there's nothing that she can't do. And that's what I love about the record, is that she does her whole skill set in all of these different ways throughout this album, so that you never flag in your attention, and you're always like being impressed by something new as the album's going on.
And like I already mentioned Rolling Stone, but like some of the lyrics on here are just, I mentioned Kendrick's DNA, like it reminds me of that at times. Like, you can diss me 3 times, pull it up behind, you'll never see probably the reason why your boss had to resign. N-words follow my step, read about me like I'm Eli, I just book a flight only to land and have some me time. Like that.
Her pen game is just
bars
fucking untouchable this entire time.
Looking like the future got you fearing the unknown. I got stories regarding your bitch I won't disclose. Picture perfect, nothing pitch. I can't. I'm not gonna.
So good.
You did a really good attempt. Well done. But no, we need to talk about her fucking technical ability as a rapper, like her flow on this album.
It's supposed it can go into relaxed and intense at the same time. Like, it has the fact that her last album was jazz based makes so much sense, because her flow is like jazz. It can move into flows so easily, and it just flows. Well, I guess that's the point of the word flow, but you get what I mean. Like,
I was taking a re-listen to Soul Train, the John Coltrane record, earlier today while I was doing some writing, and I feel an affinity between the role piano has on that record to what like her flow does on this record, in a weird way, where it links it up melodically and rhythmically to these weird sort of rhythmical abstractions that comes with a heritage of jazz, and just connects it gives it like a to quote a turf, to give it the hairline through a wand in the Harry Potter books, you know, like it feels like it does that.
Something I think is really funny about like this album is like, I think we're all in agreement here. This album is excellent and is one of the best albums of the year. But can I just say this came out at a very weird time, because it's really funny hearing people go like, what was it, Loverboy versus Donda, Loverboy versus Donda. And the way I think about it is the way I thought about it in my mind earlier was, it's like people arguing about Blur versus Oasis while Radiohead was putting out the Bends. Like,
I mean, it's
yeah, they're
bullshit
both
when they're sitting here and they're talking about fucking mediocre artists versus overrated artists, and it's just like, man, for $5, name a fucking woman. She is sitting here absolutely walking over these two guys, being like, oh, I have the long, ambitious album that Kanye has, and I have the one that just fucking bops. And people are just like, oh, fucking Certified Lover Boy versus Drake. And it's just like, oh, man, shut the fuck up and listen to a woman who has a fucking Y chromosome. For fuck's sake, for once in your life, look at something that isn't Drake.
I think she's cis. Why is the wrong one?
Here's the comp. It's like, and this is not a diss to any of the albums in question, because I know that one of them is, I think, Emily's favorite album, but it's like when Nevermind and Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out on the same day, but also Bad Motorfinger came out that day as well. And I don't imagine as many people were talking about Bad Motorfinger on that.
I will add that, you know what else came out on that day?
Low End Theory.
Low End Theory.
Yeah.
Low End Theory.
Yeah.
And though Nevermind is my second favorite album, so yeah, yes, you're right. I'm pretty partial to that one. But it's like, yeah, I can't lie. Like, yeah, Bad Motorfinger should get part of hype. And yeah, like, it's a similar thing here where it's like, I'm not saying it like I just compared Kanye and Drake to Blur and Oasis. I like Blur and Oasis. Mm-hmm. It's just the thing is like years down the line, people, as much as people like Blur and Oasis, they're going to look at the Bends and Radiohead as that moment where something changed. Mm. And I think that's going to be the thing here. People, I don't hate Kanye. I don't hate Drake. I'm a little less hot on Drake, but Kanye has some really good stuff in his catalog.
Okay, you can say you hate Drake on this podcast. No one's going to judge you.
I haven't listened to enough Drake to hate Drake. He has some good singles, but
exactly.
But I've never listened to a full record. But that's the thing. Like, people are going to look back at this moment and they're going to think of like two artists that released at the same time that were conquering the world. Mm. But people aren't going to even, and they're going to think about that. But Introvert's going to exist on a whole different level.
Yeah.
They're going to think of that as two albums that released at the same time, but they're going to think of Introvert as an entire year and era. Like,
absolutely.
The thing is, like, Donda and Certified Lover Boy, and I know we're going to move away from this immediately because I know it's already getting like the point's been made. But Donda and Certified Lover Boy are going to exist as things that happened in their artists' discographies. This record will go down as a significant landmark. Like, this record will endure as something that represents
irrespective of Simz or irrespective of Drake, Kanye. It's just like, this is already proved to be the critical juggernaut of 2021, which I think speaks volumes to the fact that it's just like, when I went to rate this on Rate Your Music, I looked at it and I was just like, oh my God, this has a 4.16 or whatever fucking
it's
ridiculous
at 4.20 right now.
Yeah, it's fucking absolutely absurd.
It's going up.
Getting,
nice.
Which, first of all, fucking good. She deserves this because, Gray Area was a great album that was really, really fun that I really, really enjoyed. But I think it's undeniable that it's like, whether or not you think that's her best project or whether or not you think this is better, tit for tat, whatever. But this next project here is her expanding her sound. It's her expanding her ambition. It's her expanding the fact that it's like she's not content being in just one place. It's like, no, she wants to play with the fucking big boys. And not only can she do that, and she can fucking smack them up a little bit while she's there. And I think she deserves it because her technical ability is absolutely unparalleled when it comes to people who have dropped shit this year. Little Simz, she's not a Kanye, she's not a Drake, she doesn't have that kind of stuff behind her. But the fact that this is getting the acclaim it is, I mean, it speaks.
I mean,
for itself,
Kendrick
the
wasn't
fact that it's-
Kendrick back when
No,
Twin
of
Butterfly
course
came
not.
out.
Everybody
when it
has
came
to
out.
start somewhere, and I think this is probably where Little Simz, for most people who haven't been at least paying attention to her, this is probably where she's going to quote unquote start for most people.
Tyler exploded out of Tyler had an explosion, but I don't think his album releases became an event until Flower Boy.
Yeah,
and that's a good point,
precisely.
because the thing that this is missing, that all these other classics that we've talked about is missing, is something that we might not necessarily see, because when we look at rate your music, that's a bunch of music nerds. Of course, they're going to rate it highly.
Yeah.
But this, I want to see this being more commercially successful. I want to see this breaking through to the mainstream, and I
will
feel
say
like
this
it's
did
doing
sell
that.
a lot of copies in the UK. I will say it sold more than Gray Area.
It's charting better and better as weeks go by. So thankfully, that's been happening. Like I saw it chart on my Twitter at least.
But
today.
I don't
It's
see
doing
it
pretty
on
well.
US charts though, sadly.
Oh no, it's probably not going to get
to be
that
fair,
high.
like Little Simz is already like a figure that has like is like established in the UK scene. She's going to sell records over here.
I know, but I'm not talking about the UK. I'm talking about becoming widely successful.
Like worldwide.
I wonder if it is something to do with because like so much of general like commercial success is tied up in how well an album does in America. And I wonder if it's a British hip hop artist thing. There still seems to me to be this weird distance between the popular mainstream music in the US and in the world of hip hop, and really getting into an understanding and vibing with the world of the British scene in that regard.
If there is an album that can bridge that gap, though, I think this is it. I will say the one thing that I think actually hurts this album the most is we mentioned Kendrick and we mentioned Tyler, we mentioned all those people. You know what all of them had? Major labels.
Yeah.
Little Simz is independent.
That's definitely unfortunate. I think that like also the bad thing about it is that this album had a set release date, and two albums that I'm pretty sure just sort of came out and fucking sniped it were fucking Donda and Certified Lover Boy, who just like decided to come out on this exact day, where it's just like you had to occupy the exact same genre, where it's just like, I'm sure that like, you know, not to dwell on it or anything, but at the same time, I can't help but be a little bit miffed that it's like, you know, she was somebody who was like, I'm gonna drop on this day, fucking just like, I'm gonna decide a normal album release date like a normal fucking artist, and then two of the biggest albums of the year have to suddenly decide to drop on that day, and that had to impact her numbers, which is fucking bullshit.
I think it definitely has. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that I don't think it's had an impact, but unfortunately I do think that it has.
Yeah,
and it's a real shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also think I think it's weird. Okay, I'll say this, like, it's become less of a thing. Like, a lot of the big artists have done this thing, and I hate to say this because it was started by my favorite band, Radiohead. They've started doing the thing of just dropping albums with no press and everything, and just saying, this is a power move. Here it is. Like, it's coming out in 5 days. It's coming out today. It's coming out whenever. And having these weird rollouts where you never know when it's about to come out. And in a way, that's lost something in the impact of like having all this hype build slowly over time. And I get why it happened. It fits for the internet. When something hits like that, you're unexpected, it gets it trending faster. And hype is harder. And when everything's coming at you immediately, hype is hard to build consistently unless there's a mystery. But there's something about the fact that this was built up to for months, and all of a sudden, like, everyone's talking about something else, and you have that hype, and it just hits over you in that moment where you finally listen to it. There's something special about that. And it feels weird. It feels gross that two artists definitely did not need to look at their hype that way, took it from her.
There is something about this album that just instantly, like, divorced from the hype, divorced from the reception and all that. The second I heard all of this, I was just like, God, at least for me anyway, this is going to go down as a classic in the genre for the year, and it deserves to be heralded as such. And I think that's kind of the thing, is that like, I'm still seeing this grow up in the charts and grow up in all the things. And it's like, you can get all, you know, hypey and talk about all the other releases that came out. And it's like, it's a testament to this, that I still keep seeing this climb in the charts, and I still keep seeing people talk about this, and the discourse and the other albums that were released on this day, it's already starting to fade. Whereas this is already like, it's staying in people's rotation. It's staying in people's lists. I think this is, when people think of 2021, I think they are going to think of Little Simz instead of insert artist here when it comes to landmark releases. And that's what's important about this.
Like 2021 has already set itself out to be a landmark year for music, I believe, anyway.
Oh, totally.
And
this is last year I thought was a relatively weak year because of the pandemic. This is it roaring back in my.
The thing about this year is that it's been an amazing year for music, but I've also felt for much of the year that it hasn't been a great year for hip hop, which is strange.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, like, I'm talking about big hip hop releases. The Backwash album was great, no denying it. But
it's been mostly indie artists.
This feels like, I mean, obviously this is an indie artist, we can't deny that, but it does feel like, at least of what we've had so far this year, this will be one of the most enduring records of hip hop that we look back on when we think of 2021.
Right.
At this point, I think I would like to hear, Morgan, from you, because you haven't spoken yet. I'd like to hear what you think.
Shut us the fuck up, please.
I'd like to hear what you think of this record. I mean, this strikes me as the kind of thing you'd be into, but who knows?
I don't have anything to add on this. It's fucking brilliant. Like,
yeah.
It's so lush, and Simz is so assured and confident, even when she's outright bearing her soul. And no matter what mode she's in, she's entirely intoxicating as a presence, as a writer, as a fucking this album doesn't never really let up either. I do think it is a bit too long. I feel like certain things could have been trimmed up, but maybe we also, maybe it's also the fact that we had to review fucking Donda this week. Maybe there's some rollover effect there. So who knows?
I'd rather listen to this album twice than Donda once.
Precisely.
I would rather listen to this album.
And I was one of the people
times.
nicer to Donda.
I would rather listen to this album 13 times in a row than listen to Donda once on like 3 different sittings again.
Yeah, honestly.
Point is, it's good, and as great as this is, I can't wait to see what she does next.
If I can put like a period on this whole thing, it's just that like everything around her is fucking fantastic in a way that it rarely is. It's like to make an album this great, you have to set up everything. You have to set up your song structure, your album structure, the way that your production sounds, the way that your flows work. Everything has to be, the stars have to align absolutely flawlessly. And she has to come up here and she has to hit them out of the park like she's a fucking baseball player. And lo and fucking behold, she does. It's the fact that of the matter is that, like, no matter what she's going for, if she's going for something grand and opulent, or she's going for something really, really direct, like she is on Gray Area, is that no matter what happens, is that she can live up to everything, flow-wise, lyric-wise, everything. She's proved herself to be one of the best technical talents, but this also proves that she's one of the best emotionally evocative talents out there in the business right now. She is absolutely unfucking touchable when it comes to the modern scene of current rap artists. And the fact that, she needs more attention. I don't care if she's gotten a lot of attention on Rate Your Music. I don't care if she's gotten attention on aggregate sites. Is that everyone needs to give this woman a little bit more of what she fucking deserves.
Listening to this album is like watching people play Through the Fire and Flames and Guitar Hero 3 on the hardest difficulty. And not miss a single fucking note. I
always say it. Little Simz is like Dragon Force.
That is not what I said. No. I want that clear as day.
But is she wrong?
Dragon Force sucks, so kind of.
Fair.
So really, Donda is like Dragon Force.
They don't suck that bad.
Okay.
on that note,
favorite tracks and ratings for sometimes I might the album. Let's do reverse order.
SIMBI.
SIMBI, indeed. Emily, why don't you go first with your favorite tracks, least favorite, and rating?
please.
All right. So my favorite tracks, Introvert has got to be my number one. It's a great opening track. It's a high point on the album, and I love it. I love you, I hate you. Woman. I guess How Did You Get Here? And there's so many I like on here. I guess I'd say Standing Ovation. Standing Ovation sounds great. Least favorite? I guess it's I See You, but I See You is not even a bad track. It just doesn't fit with the vibe for me. If I really had to say a least favorite track, it'd probably be Never Make Promises Interlude. And even then, that's not a bad track. It's just kind of unnecessary. I give it a 9 out of 10. I think it's one of the best albums of the year. I think it's a top 5 record, and goddamn, like everyone should listen to this. This is I guarantee you a lot of people are gonna say this is the best album of the year. This is their 10 out of 10. And you know what? I can't blame them.
Right.
I can't blame them.
Correct.
Looks at my 10 out of 10s for the year thus far.
Oh, it's been fucking absurd. My 3 favorite tracks on this record are Woman. I cannot express enough how utterly beguiled I am by that song. It is absolutely just an incredible piece of music. I'll also put out I Love You, I Hate You, absolutely, definitely, and Little Q Part 2. Those are my 3 favorite tracks. Least favorite, if I had to pick one, would be the Never Make Promises interlude. If I had to pick one that isn't an interlude, I'd probably say Misunderstood, I think, weirdly enough, because I think How Did You Get Here is such a perfect ending to the record that it makes Misunderstood a little bit redundant, in my opinion, but it's not a huge criticism. It's just like,
I think it's like he's the freeze frame at the end of the sitcom episode. It fits well. It's the ending.
it works because the record has this lengthy sweep to it anyway, that you can have that extended final moment and have it fit flow wise. But anyway, really, 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 really great album. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10.
Amazing. Okay, so my favorite tracks are Introvert, How Did You Get Here, and Misunderstood.
Why did you say that? Like, how did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
Ray, why did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
Misunderstood, a beautiful song about family. If my least favorite track is, I don't know, probably one of the fucking interludes. It's a 9 out of 10. Who cares?
Morgan.
3 favorite tracks are I like Introvert is like fucking barely
Godlike.
well, yes, it's barely not top 5 songs of the year, and you can thank August for that one because he's at number 5.
I see sinners in a church. I see sinners in a church.
Anyway,
Me when she said, sometimes I might be introvert.
Not for nothing, but her voice is so fucking sexy.
That's just a weird way of putting it. Just slowly. You had to say it as slowly as possible.
Look,
Sometimes I might be introvert.
look. I heard that song, and then I was like, okay, so this is like clearly the high point of the album. And yeah, it's my favorite on the album. And then Woman is right after it, and I'm like, fuck! Son of a bitch!
It's like it's the best song on the album, but never does it feel like it's all downhill from there.
No. So yeah, additionally I will say Protect My Energy and spoiled for choice. Standing ovation. I mean, I could pick on one of the interludes, but I like listening to Emma Corrin talk. So fucking whatever, man. 9 out of 10.
Fair enough.
Amazing.
Rare James and T
I'd
moment where
just say,
Tyler
out of
is
the-
the lowest review of all of us.
But August gives us an 8 out of 10. It's
Yeah, I
worth
was gonna
saying
say.
now.
Yeah. And Jake, it remains to you.
My 3 favorite tracks. Well, I'm gonna say Introvert because to quote August, that's the best hip hop
Why are you
song
getting
of
more
the
southern?
year. Well,
Because he's drunken.
I am
He's
from
playing
the
Roland.
great state of Kentucky, where we have
no.
horses and bourbon.
Oh no.
I'm also
I got the
gonna say
horses.
I wish I
in the
hadn't
fire.
pointed it out.
Shut up.
Anxiety Attack, and we're gonna go with Point and Kill, and we're also gonna go with Woman. Least favorites. See, here's the thing: is that normally I would say like, oh, the interlude I like the least, but every interlude here I deem to be essential for the cohesiveness or the record. So I don't really give a fucking shit about any of this goddamn thing. I think my least favorite song is probably like Speed, even though I think that bangs like a motherfucker. So yeah, that one, but it's like a 9 out of 10 for me.
And the average is 8.7, a very high rating, equivalent to only a few records. But Genesis Owusu, Swelling Without Teeth, Forever in Your Heart by Black Dress is one of my 10s of this year. Sweet Trip, their new record.
Oh, yes.
These are just all of my top 10 entries this
This
year.
is incredibly satisfying to my like autistic number obsession, which is that the second album we reviewed on the 2 episodes that Emily's been on has been an album that got an 8.7. That's
yeah.
Also, I believe
Oh,
Cavalcade
that's
got a high
amazing.
8 too.
Cavalcade did do really well.
Do you want to know what the other 2 records are? that
Cavalcade got an
8.7?
8.8.
What are they saying?
It's Iridescence and Go Farther in Lightness.
Iridescence is
210s.
the best Brockhampton album in my opinion.
Yeah,
Fuck
you're not
everyone.
you're not the only person here who thinks that. Don't worry.
In fact,
I thought that.
Do you ever?
I thought it.
Do you ever think about how our Go Farther in Lightness average would have been a perfect 10 if August didn't steamroll it?
Literally,
I do.
literally,
I
4
do.
people gave this album a 10, and then August gave it a 4.
wait, what album is
you
this? I
know-
didn't hear what it was.
Go Farther in
Lightness
Lightness by Gang of Youths.
If you want a good rock album and you also want something that sounds kind of like The National, fucking
If you would
Oh,
like
you're
to
speaking my
hear,
language.
if you would
Emily-
like to
Go-
hear the greatest album of all time,
it's literally
It's
Morgan's
real good.
favorite album of all
Emily,
time.
from what I
You
can
know-
gather about your taste in music, I think you'll really like that album.
You will.
I
That's
like
like
some
a
indie rock and I
9
like some kind of
maybe.
grungy stuff, and I'm like, ooh.
Oh, you'll love that.
Indie rock.
then.
You'll love
The
it. It's
opening
great.
track
Um,
to that album is just the most fucking banging rock song of the 2010s.
You know, I too thought that Iridescence was the best Brockhampton record, and then their last one came out, and
I still need to
I
listen
thought
to
it was
Last
better.
Light.
It's good. It's really good. Okay. Let's wrap up.
Feeling like,
I'm finally on a full album.
feeling like Go Farther in Lightness, you're a cop.
Thank you for sticking with us. If you're still watching, this obviously will be heavily edited from what
We
it
got
was
a
recorded
Donda
as.
I
link
drank
podcast.
the entire fucking bottle.
Yeah, we watched you, Jake. We were all right
you know
here.
what
Shut
though?
the fuck
You know what
up,
though?
Morgan.
Well, we
Our
literally
about
did.
you.
I mean, like we know.
Our fucking review of Donda will be more succinct, better edited, and just tighter than the actual fucking record.
Stop. I knew where you were going with that the second you opened your mouth.
Let us know at home what you think of either of the albums that we have discussed today, Kanye West, Donda, and Little Simz, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert. We want to hear from you. We want to hear if you have any additional perspectives or things that we didn't touch on that you want to shout out. Let us know. If you disagree with our points, then let us know why in the comments below. As I've always said in the past, we do always read the comments. We really appreciate them, regardless of what they are. And we Make sure you like and subscribe as well if you haven't already done that as well. It really helps us out. We're getting very close to 1K subs now, which is very exciting. It's going to happen, I think, within the next 4 weeks, which is
You
very
disagree with our opinions.
Do it,
go
folks.
fuck
The queen
yourself.
commands you.
yeah.
So
anyway.
you know, the way the comments work is that if you are rational and have something interesting to say, you know, that makes us extraordinarily happy. And if you have something completely meaningless and stupid to say, we're going to laugh at you. And that also makes us extremely happy.
Before we go, though, we thank Emily for joining us again for the second time. It's been awesome to have Emily for a whole episode this time. And it's been a very
happy to be back.
chaotic and fun and argumentative in the best way sort of discussion. But Emily, why don't
Happy
you
to be back, and I want to be here more. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Emily, why don't you tell the people at home what you've got going on in your life? Fuck, that's Sean Evans, Hot Ones. Why did I do that?
Keep that in. I need
Roll
that
out the
in
red
there.
carpet for you, motherfucker.
this camera, Emily, go.
God, that's such a great intro. I really hope you don't edit that out.
I'll leave it in just for you.
You can find me at YouTube. AdequateEmily is my channel, all one word. AdequateEmily. It was a really great decision of me to choose a word that people can't spell well for my brand.
Spelled it after the Kanye fan.
Yeah.
If you're a Kanye fan, my name. If you're a Kanye fan, my name is Mia Mulder. And
Wow.
Throw her under the bus. Jesus Christ.
don't do that to her. I love her.
I do not know who that is.
She's the trans woman that people are going to compare me to. No, I love her so much. She's one of my cool YouTube friends.
It's cool. It's cool.
God, no, I should have named someone who gets shit anyway. If you want to find me, you can find me at Sarah Zed.
Wow.
Okay. Let's not burn any more bridges.
No, I love both of them. I'm joking, and they both not. They would both be fine with that. But
women on YouTube be trans.
but yeah. I don't know how to segue back in.
What a complete shit
Yeah,
show.
you can find me. You can find me on Twitter at AdequateEmily. Same thing. I shitpost on there and apparently I impersonate Lights Camera Jackson on there too. If some people,
what a
God,
fucking
that's so
debacle
fucking
that
funny.
was! Holy shit!
You're just being like fucking transition timeline, and then people just
Emily.
being like, "Is this actually lights camera?"
Emily, the funniest part about that whole thing was how, like, and I mean this, I hope this comes across right, but it was how distressed you were about the whole situation, about like trying to make it clear that it was a joke, and people
No one
shouldn't
was
take it seriously.
scroll down.
Jackson.
That just made it so
Terrible
much
life.
funnier.
And then people started going to his Twitter and yelling at him about why did you block her? And I'm like, I don't care.
I got genuinely
Wow.
sad when I saw that he blocked you. That was heartbreaking. But
I now have emotes in my Discord.
no.
Speaking of which, if you want to donate to my channel and make it so I don't live at my parents' house anymore, patreon.com/adequateemily.
Yeah.
You can see behind me, I have my teleprompter. I'm going to be filming probably the video tonight. So the next video essay is coming on the way. The script is finished. I'm going to record it. And if people are to be believed, this is the wildest thing I've talked about in for a while. I believe I told Jake the concept of it. I'm not going to say it on the podcast because I want people to be surprised by it. Because I do like the idea of just blindsiding people with how wild the story is. But it is, Jake can confirm, it is wild. It is really funny and also really interesting. And I think people are going to be really surprised by it, and I think it's going to be my best video, which is why I bought which is why I made a teleprompter. Our phone board
Shit.
and a bunch of shit I bought for $20.
It's worth saying that Emily's videos are already great. So if this is your best one, then
Will I make sure
you.
that all of the aforementioned links are in the description below
Yeah,
for easy
Patreon in the
access?
description.
So go and
YouTube
check.
in the
I mean,
description.
look, at the very least, go and check them out. At the very least, and go and see if it's for you. Emily is. I'm sure that if you're this far into the video, you've enjoyed Emily's presence on this video as much as we've enjoyed having
I
her.
do talk over
So-
people quite a bit, so if you enjoy me
Aw.
talking,
Well,
listen,
that's
it's my
our brand.
attention deficit disorder. I
we
apologize.
we've definitely got a
Fucking
more
me.
than adequate dose of Emily. And we'll
Oh,
Your days are numbered.
we look forward
Cheers.
to the inevitable third appearance, the
number.
trilogy.
I
The
I
number is
love
not
coming
low
on
enough.
here, and if anyone's here because I post about this or anything, sub to all these guys. This is amazing. This is always fun. I always have a blast. These are some of the funniest motherfuckers on the internet. They have some of the best entertainment, and God,
My heart.
I'm going. My stomach hurts from how much I've been laughing for the last few hours. This is a great time, and I'm really happy to be on.
You know, I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna clip that, and that's gonna be like our press commercial.
That's
thing, as it's going to
it's
be.
the channel trailer.
Yeah, that's gonna be it. It's
Micro
gonna be.
me.
celebrity Adequate Emily. Give the
Actually, I'm gonna
Chances
change the Twitter.
podcast
I'm
their
gonna change the
approval.
Twitter header to be like a quote from what you just said, and then dash
Lights,
adequate
camera,
Emily.
Jackson.
yeah.
Like it's gonna be. I wouldn't do that. We want to have you again. We don't want to scare you away. So yeah. Anyway, as always, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, Disneyland.
Top of the morning to you.
Can I talk my shit? Anyway, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, Disneyland, the happiest place on earth.